Hello and welcome to the Overlap Rugby podcast. This is episode number 41.
Yeah.
The week after the week of the break of the Six Nations.
Yes. Week after week two.
Week after week two, that's right. And not going to be too deprived of rugby though, because Super Rugby returns to not our shores, but
our screens.
Our screens,
Yeah.
the world's shores this week, and very excited to do that. We will preview it later on in the program. But to start with, as we have been doing the last number of weeks, we're going to take a look at the Six Nations games that have just gone. Round two, again, 3 winners, 3 losers, and
The usual affair,
and we're going to start with the Ireland game in Murrayfield against Scotland, which they won.
Yes,
22 points to 13 on Saturday afternoon.
Yep, a good place to start, as it was the first game of the weekend as well in sequence, wasn't it? It was
indeed.
Ireland back to winning ways, not vintage performance wise. Definitely a few more question marks raised in the interim, as there are always going to be after like a week one result like that. It's going to be just hanging over the rest of the tournament now and beyond. That result, to be honest, is going to linger all year.
Materially, it has an impact on the tournament as well, just because it doesn't seem possible that Ireland can win the tournament after just that 5-0 defeat.
And the failure to acquire a 4-try bonus point in Murrayfield, which is obviously pre-kickoff. That's such a tough ask, but in the context of that game, it felt like it was possibly there as well.
Yeah.
There was
absolutely there.
Well, it was, they kicked that penalty to kind of push themselves just out at arm's length, where they felt more comfortable. But obviously, an alternative approach to that penalty is to kick to the corner. I'd
say the boys will recognise that when they look back on it in the review, or probably having already done so. It was one of those where after the game, Murray Best was talking about it. He found the game quite confusing. Obviously, stop-start. It was a Roman Poit game, which has its own connotations. You know, there was a little bit of confusion with how the game was being.
Laidlaw was calling them out in the post-match.
Whatever to be said about that, but it was stop-start, and there was a lot of confusion, and Ireland just felt uneasy, and they knew they couldn't afford to lose this week, and they just wanted to get it done. I think when they look back on it in the review, like they'll probably start to realise just how off Scotland were, and how how there for the taking they were, and in the context of the match, they just felt like, let's win it. Scotland are dangerous. Let's just get over the line here.
Yeah. Which, to be honest, is a refreshing enough take in a World Cup year where we're going to be in their pool anyway. Like, it's not a bad thought to go to Murrayfield with, giving them their due, considering the last time we went there. Like, a lot was said of us having an off day again. That narrative does seem to recur in many as a defeat. But
what is a defeat if not an off day?
No, this is it. True. It's like, it's not your best day if you didn't win. But like, there was a lot that Scotland got right that day, and they were a lot more dangerous, I felt, than they were in this instance. Even though Finn Russell probably had a really good game from 10, they did look dangerous at times. Some of their probing, attacking, kicking did scare us at points, but the net result of it, because compounding that with the fact that they dropped a lot of ball and couldn't get through phases a lot, it kind of felt like even with the probing kicks that looked dangerous for a time, maybe they would have been better off holding the ball for a little longer, because they just couldn't seem to get anything going.
Able to. I mean, they did kick it a little too much, but they also made loads of errors, as you say, and it was just outside of that long attacking set towards the end of the half, which would have been huge if they'd managed to get over.
And what was actually huge anyway in the context of Ireland, looked really felt that was their highlight of that game. I'd say that's going to be their big strong takeaway, because they do pride themselves on their defence, and like they shipped 4 tries at home the week before.
And Murray Best was harking back to that set. I think in his post-match interview was a good one. It was Stockdale's tackle in the corner. Carney shot up by, I think it was on Seymour, I want to say, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
it just feels like it should have been on that wing. And it saved the try, and Scotland couldn't get it done, and that was essentially as close as Scotland got to generating any kind of continuity in attack.
Yeah, and the game was already getting away from them before the Russell interception as well. It was kind of felt like Ireland were exerting some control, even despite Sexton going off and Hogg going off. Yeah, you're right in saying there were just disruptions aplenty, but it was like Ireland are the more patient side of those two, so it felt like the game was going in such a way that it was always going to benefit Ireland rather than the fast and loose pace that Scotland would want to be playing with. And as such, like, it didn't get broken up enough, and players like Hugh Jones really weren't in the game in an impactful kind of way.
The only way he was with a couple of errors, and it was for the Scots it was a curious.
It was baffling watching from that kind of
angle. It was,
angle.
To be honest with you, like if I we ponder on it from our waters. If I was a Scottish rugby fan, I'd be pretty flat.
Yeah,
because it was like they have this very, very difficult World Cup draw that probably not much is going to come of it. It's probably a quarterfinal exit. Is almost certainly that's how it's going to go for them.
Yeah,
and this was a year then where every other team was probably a little bit more focused, perhaps in the World Cup, than maybe the Scots have a little bit of liberty to focus on the Six Nations. They've been bridesmaids for years. They've got that start against Italy where they got 4 tries and 5 points on the board, leading the Six Nations going into it, and then to come out so flat. It was, especially in attack. It was sort of, you saw that those problems that Italy obviously couldn't expose, or you couldn't learn anything from that Italy game that we pondered might be there, just from Laidlaw and Russell hadn't played together obviously. In playing for Clermont and Racing, and then there's Edinburgh players to be moulded with Glasgow players, and then stylistically they were perhaps a little bit lost as well. Defensively they did start well. They started with a bit of hustle. They were attacking Ireland behind the gain line. They were getting some good chop tackles in, but that just sort of faded as the game went on.
A lot of their forward carriers, the difference between their first half performance and their second half performance was kind of marked by just a general fatigue.
They did their defense leans on turnovers.
It does, and their first one didn't come till the 60th minute.
That's right. Yeah, Jamie Ritchie got one in the game, but the absence of Hamish Watson obviously massive.
And the focus that Ireland put again on their ruck ball, going back to the fundamentals of their game after kind of being dismantled in such a way, in such a fashion by England the week before. It was always going to be a kind of a doubling down on do what got us here, what got us to where we're at, do that really, really well, worry about the rest later. And that was kind of what they did. There was it was quite a quintessential, despite the fact that it felt flat watching it back. There's a lot of hallmarks of Schmidt's Ireland all over that performance. There's the beautiful set piece try. There's the kind of constant regeneration of ruck ball, of semi-quick ruck ball. They couldn't quite get the quickness they wanted, but they were still forward focused, trying to get over the gain line. There were a few little niggly moments, things like Peter O'Mahony putting a shot in. There was kind of a few holds behind the ruck to try and generate some things. It was our kicking game was still loose, which is part of what contributed to us not really having the full, or feeling like there was that much control to go after the game, because they really do like to be all over a game before they go after it, and they definitely didn't feel that in Murrayfield. But there were a lot of good signs of just the roots of the game plan still being there and strong.
The positives are still there for Ireland. It started, certainly, there was one or two phases where Aki flinched into first receiver, but for the most part, what they were doing in first half was off Sexton. And until Sexton went down, obviously, which changed things. But even then, they were playing off Carberry. But it was very much their attack was very much orchestrating itself as it does. So it's positive to know that they can still be there. In the context of discussing them as a World Cup contender, they're still.
That's where the questions are born of. That's where the criticisms come from, which is a good place to be in as an Irish rugby fan. But also, it's it's some of the criticism they came in for in week one was kind of unfounded, or overblown anyway, as it always is in a defeat of that fashion. But what we're talking about is just. This is at the end of the year now. This is when the World Cup is at. If there are still some prevailing issues, those are the ones that need to be, some glaring ones. Those are the ones that need to be solved. There was an interesting stat. I was obviously looking up a few other kind of breakdowns of the games thus far, and one stat that emerged was that Ireland, I think it was a tweet even though it emerged on it, is that Ireland have in the last few years never lost or never won a game when they had more than a 2-point deficit at half time.
Yeah.
More than 2-point deficit at half time, you have to go back to somewhere like 2011 before we won a game like that.
It was probably Italy.
It could have been, but I can't recall the game itself. But it's very telling about just how much of a forward runner we prefer to be. And this game, despite being stop-start, sloppy, kind of ugly to look at a lot of the time, that's the fact that Ireland were at arm's length that whole time and Scotland were the ones chasing, is probably what allowed them to kind of eke out that result in the end, despite not feeling fully accurate and losing their key playmaker, who they were using a lot in the first half in Sexton. It's obviously going to be tougher then, but a few positives in that, just Carberry getting that many minutes, getting like you said, one or two loose plays. Finn getting a perfect read on his pass that was very, very nervy and flat as well. But then growing into getting the chance to grow into the game and become that kind of into that flowy temperament where, and it was off loose ball that he created that try.
Yeah.
And it's like he's still got a lot to him, and the more minutes he gets like that, the better, because he can't just in preparation for the World Cup, it can't just be a game against Italy and then in you go. You know.
No, indeed. And that is why it was probably better. Last week you talked about the failed experiment of Henshaw. It was a wild one anyway, but it's probably better that they put him in against England first. So now they know it doesn't work, and it's not going to work in 6 months.
Yeah.
So it was like as opposed to if you chucked him in against Italy and he'd scored a couple of tries. Now all of a sudden you're like, he's a fullback when he just wasn't tested there.
Kind of happened with Larmour in the autumn. Didn't he play at fullback for that game?
I thought he was a 20. No, he was a fullback.
You're right. For Italy, and then he got the nod against Argentina, and it didn't go as well for him against Argentina. And he seems to have since fallen out of favour.
Well, he hasn't fallen out of favour. He's fallen onto the bench
for that jersey. I mean, for the 15.
Yes.
Joe doesn't really want him there as that 15 option in terms of mirroring Carney in much the same way as he has like Marmion come in when Marmion has to come in and try and do Murray's job a lot of the time, which was what happened in the All Blacks game when Carney's so integral to the system and the way they play that he's just looking for options. And I can see Henshaw has played at fullback before. He's big and physical and more roaming, kind of built more similarly to Carney, but it's not enough, and his reading of the game doesn't compare to the literally like 14 seasons or so that Carney has played in there.
Rob Carney is genuinely elite at covering the backfield, at defending in general positionally. He's genuinely elite.
Yeah, he showed a lot of that at the weekend as well. It was because there have been like a lot of attacking kicks paying dividends in this Six Nations, a lot more so than in Six Nations gone by. Like across the board, teams are scoring tries through them, and England are kicking the leather off the ball and getting good dividends from it. And
there's copy.
Scotland tried to do that against us. And it didn't have the same effect while Carney was there.
Exactly, and Rob is really great at that. It's probably a consequence of just a bit of copycat tactics in defence from Andy Farrell's style.
Yeah,
I think are probably going on. It's the sort of loosey-goosey thing France might do. Ireland are doing this, we'll vaguely set up in this shape and put centres on the wings or whatever.
Well, dear, we'll get into that.
But the criticisms of Ireland, of which I actually have several heading into a World Cup, obviously, as you say,
with a mind to win
within the context
thing.
of exactly. Like Joe was giving out last week. He was saying, it's so fickle. We're the heroes, and then we lose one game, and we're the zeros. But I sort of think of that differently, as in it's a consequence of you who are already etched into Irish history and Irish lore as this great magician, but you've raised the bar. And that's the point. Like, you want to beat the best in the world. You want to be second in the world, win a Grand Slam, go through the whole season second in the world, then beat the best in the world. You put yourself in that category.
Indeed.
And that's if the All Blacks had a home defeat to England with 4 tries conceded, getting absolutely pummeled the way we did. Yeah, you're damn right. Things would change. It wouldn't matter what would happen for the rest of the year. If that happened, that would be something else, And that's, I think it's right. But I also think more than that, it exposes, as you say, a couple of problems going behind. The Carberry thing is a curious one. I mean, I think you saw, like, I've had a running theory about Carberry that was probably enforced rather than detracted from in this week. I just think, like, he's obviously a very, very talented player. And I think when you look at Ireland's offence, I mean, last week you saw Sexton hit off the ball every time, so he couldn't follow up, couldn't get his hands back on the ball. And this week you saw him hit, even almost to a more exaggerated degree, a more clumsy, less subtle degree from the Scots. He was hit late basically every play until he had to go off.
Happened in the last World Cup.
It happened in the last World Cup.
France.
But I think on the field, even when Sexton stays up, and he isn't going off the field injured, if he's getting rattled and he's getting rocked and he can't make it around the corner, I think we made this point last week, but I think you need a second distributor in there. And I think, obviously I would have Rob as the starting fullback, but I would love to see Carberry and Sexton on the field together. And I would love to see Carberry get the freedom to play from fullback. I just think he's at first, like, he's never looked better off there. When he plays 10, it's such a different jarring thing for Ireland. Like, he's very different from Sexton. He's very heads up on the fly. Like, he can run certain plays, but he's very much making his own calls. And now that he's establishing himself more as a 10, you can see him, and it's positive and negative, But within this Irish attack, it's just a strange side. Like, he's very much trying to hustle and do his own thing, which I just think I like it a lot. But I think it's like almost Damien McKenzie. It reminds me of a little bit. He's got that footwork. He's got that vision. He can put people into space, or he can make something happen. And he's so worth getting in the team.
Yeah.
But from 10 is where you kind of see limitations. Now, he does have a better boot than D-Mac, and a better vision as the boot.
Both a left foot and a right foot as well, which is why it's curious, because I've heard a lot of Irish pundits, that idea has been floated a bit as well, the idea of him at 15, and it's like being dismissed offhand compared to, it was being floated actually in response to the Henshaw thing, and like some of the rationales behind it was crazy to me, was where it was like, I can see the rationale in having Henshaw there, a guy who has a good kicking game, or some quote like that. I think it was Alan Quinlan made that point. I'm like going, hang on, Joey Carberry has a better, more serious kicking game than Robbie Henshaw. Like, Henshaw has a good centre's kick on him. He'd kick on the run. He does a good like outside of the boot thing that goes quite long, quite low, and can find corners, similar to what Henry Slade's been offering for England. He has that kick in him. But like, as far as a multitude of kicks covering the backfield, Carberry is a way more advanced kicker of a ball.
Joey has a turn of heel on Sexton, on Henshaw rather as well.
Well, he has a bit of that style of footwork, that thinking Stewie Hogg or McKenzie as well, where he can be evasive and find space enough and time enough to get a kick away as well.
Now, this is purely just in the context of Rob Kearney not being available. But Carberry where he has an advantage in our style of defending, whereby the fullback does a lot of work covering the backfield, is that he's quick. That's like, Henshaw's not that quick. As Matt Williams would let you know, he's not actually that quick in those open spaces.
In terms of roaming, he's quick. Like, he has a different kind of pace. His acceleration is great in terms of how he shuts down space in the centres.
In just so, like little meters. He can
close an 8-yard gap very quickly and make attackers doubtful.
But when he's chasing a kick in behind him,
like Owen Farrell perfectly exposed it in that game before, where you could see him kick to one side of the pitch and then regather the ball from the counter kick, and then instantly go to the next side, and you can see like Henshaw covering over 100 metres of space in a few seconds, which is something you just would never have
also
to do.
There was a sense ahead the ball, and that's about it. Like, he came tearing after his own infield mistaken kick, and then came tearing back to cover that space. I mean, it was very much all over the place. But I think Joey Carberry would be better positioned from a defensive perspective to occupy that role,
as well as bringing something more from counter attacking, and even from a multi-phase option. Solving,
especially from a multi-phase option, solving Ireland's problem of not having a second distributor, and giving Ireland the ability to have that looseness and that creativity, but also have Sexton the general on the field. I think that would be massive. I think it could potentially solve a lot of our
really
problems.
Implement that kind of screenplay that most teams are utilising now as well.
Because we don't have a second
there's a
distributor.
little bit of pod shape to what we do, and there can be Sexton around the back, and there can be two-touch Sexton plays and stuff, but it's rare that he has a pullback option out wide who's a second distributor.
There can be, but most of the time it's a forward pod giving it back to Sexton. You rarely see Sexton as the first man in a screenplay, and that's simply because the only way that play can work is to have two dynamic, threatening distributors.
Which, sometimes that is the case with Ringrose, but we don't seem to play him into the game that way. I feel like that shape is something that we're missing anyway, in terms of picking teams apart. But then part of that is also just our focus on resourcing rucks so well that we are actually the best team in the world, I think, at this point, in terms of just generating proper ruck ball and resourcing that area. But it comes at a sacrifice, whereby we're not as focused on support lines there, and offloads therefore support lines, and also we're just not as urgent in our need to recognise the space and go through it. We'd actually sooner see ourselves go through another 10 rucks and tire teams out.
But that's where you're getting killed, when you're not winning ruck ball and when you're behind, and that's where you need to be able to use those guys and go through those options. Which is why I think, those two centres that we had at the weekend, Aki and Farrell, with ball in hand, simply just I don't think either of them played badly, but I just don't think they offer enough. I think you need a ball player in there, and I think it's done now, in the sense that there's no fixing it this side of the World Cup. But I think it was probably a big mistake, and hindsight's an easy thing, because I probably didn't call this at the time, but it was probably in hindsight a mistake not to have brought Rory Scannell, I think, from Munster into the mix earlier. I think all those minutes that were given to Stuart McCluskey back in the last number of years, in November internationals and everything else, and all of that time that he was in camp and nothing really came of it for him. I think had those minutes been given to Rory Scannell, I think first of all you'd see a much improved Rory Scannell, and you'd have an option when Ringrose goes down for some distribution from centre.
Which doesn't, well, like they're involving Bundy Aki in that role a lot, and like he's doing a creditable job, but it's still not really his game, and there's still one or two.
He's not
loose
doing
passes.
a top test team job.
No, there are one or two loose passes coming from him because he's not the most distinguished passer of a football, and that's. Like you can try and force him to be that way, but it's not going to compare to someone like Carberry, who's an excellent passer of a ball when he's playing with confidence and with a bit of flow. And yet, like we've seen him occasionally line up with Sexton in Leinster colours in seasons gone by. I know he did. He played against Munster in one game where we I think it was in Thomond Park when we won a few seasons back, and he set up. There was a lovely Rory O'Loughlin try that was literally that. It was a screen move with Sexton to Carberry. Carberry, bit of gas through the gap, puts in Rory O'Loughlin.
Takes the pressure off Sexton. It also gives him the license to be that second man sometimes. So Carberry can be the guy taking the initial hit, and it also gives him a new dynamic to the attack. Yeah. The other thing, like one of the things that I've liked that's a huge positive from Ireland and what they're doing, is how the degree to which they recognise the value of Jacob Stockdale, and they really do recognise. Like Joe Schmidt, to his credit, like as attack coach, a lot of what Ireland are doing at the moment is just playing him into the game, putting him in space and giving him the license to try and make something happen. And he's like, he's a lad full of confidence. He seems to have the opportunity, the license to make mistakes that a lot of guys in the Ireland camp don't have. But the whole backline is functioning as a machine to generate a bit of space, put Stockdale in it, and let him do things. I love it. I think that's a real positive, and I think that we could use it, especially with Rob Kearney by himself covering the backfield, doing a lot of our defensive grunt work. I think that we could use probably trying to blood someone like that on the right wing. I think Larmour is my answer. I would love to see Larmour get a go on the right wing.
I think we touched on this last week. It's either Larmour or it's Adam Byrne if we're going to keep kicking in such an attacking way we want it.
That's the kicking. The kicking, is one point, but even just in the multi-phase, I think that Larmour is.
Larmour brings more from the multi-phase point of view.
And he's just
defenders beaten.
He breaks up the game if you put him in space. The damage he can do. I think it would be massive. I think it's certainly worth exploring, because as fun as it is to see Jacob doing what he's doing, a lot of what Ireland are doing with those subtle plays that are great that put him into space. They start with him, sort of hands in pockets, meandering, whistling around behind the ruck, and then I'm in the action, I'm running, I'm through the hole.
But he does have an excellent flake face on him.
He does.
He sells that a lot.
Really well. But teams are just going to start man marking him.
It's true. If you're just the only guy doing it. I was making that point last week, and it touches on Keith Earls, who obviously did grab his try this week, so credit to him.
Joey Carberry
made it try. But like, I do think you need more from your wingers, especially if you're a team that is built so rigidly on defensive fundamentals, where like the fullback isn't a counter-attacking option, he's a defensive anchor more so. If the two centres are kind of more defensive minded as well, because players like Rory Scannell have kind of not gotten a look in because he's erring on the side of Henshaw's first choice, and then it was Bundy Aki who can kind of match some of the physicality defensively that Henshaw brings, albeit probably a slightly lesser, that like in terms of just being dynamic and linking a bit more. I think actually Henshaw's a better passer of a ball than him as well, so it's probably slightly less, but he still does value that. And it's you're going to be that defensive minded of a team, you kind of need two finishers on either wing, really. You need to have wingers who can bag tries instantly often from nothing,
and they're just danger. That's why I'd love to see Larmour thrown here. And then the other critique, like you touched on a little earlier on when you were talking about the selection of Henshaw at fullback being, what mould of player is similar to Rob Kearney, so that we can't change the mould. It's not unreasonable. It's kind of goes to my point on my hesitation about Carberry filling for Johnny if Johnny goes down. I'd almost rather see Ross Byrne and have Carberry full-time fullback cover. That's sacrilege at the moment, the way things are going on, but I think there's possibly more potential in that. But what I would like to see in general, like Joe has had this great appreciation for depth as a solution to injuries. But it doesn't seem like he understands the value of depth, or he's appreciating right now the value of depth from a 23-man full squad, match day squad. Like,
Yeah, that's a good
Guys,
argument. You've made that before.
yeah.
I was making it after the England game as well, where it's like if you see Conor Murray having that much of an off day, and very recently we played against the All Blacks and didn't have him available and used other options there with good success because you're trusting the systems. If you're seeing him be that awful compared to his own high standards, why aren't you making the change at 55 minutes? Why is it still taking to 72 minutes to try and break the game up and make it go in your favour? Because all that's happening by leaving him in there is his confidence is probably draining with every botched kick, and it's still not working.
It's also like it's very systems oriented. There doesn't seem to be an appreciation that, like, you know, fine, you want to start Keith Earls is there doing one thing. Every time Larmour comes on in the right wing for an Ireland job, it seems like he's just trying to do what Keith Earls does. Keith Earls is probably better than Larmour at what Keith Earls does. But what can Larmour do? And that's the thing. There doesn't seem to be an appreciation of, you know, let's get Larmour into space. When we're playing a big team, like Larmour's very much just slotting in. There's no playing him into space. There's no changing the game a bit, getting this young, very quick, very elusive guy's hands onto the ball. The same with like Sean Cronin, I would say. You know, when Sean Cronin comes off the bench, I'd love to see. You wouldn't want Murray Best in the wide channels for much of the game. We'd love to see Nugget over there. Yeah, let's bring him on and let's have it change the system. Let's adapt. Let's present a new picture to the opposition in the last 20, rather than just have guys filling in and doing the same job. Yeah, which I think is sort of what you're seeing now. Yeah, and it's why, you know, ultimately, you like guys like whoever's replacing Conor Murray or even Joey Carberry in most games when Sexton doesn't go down injured. Ultimately, the game gets into this point where, you know, it's tight or it's a chess match or whatever it is, and Joe's thinking, I trust Murray to do Murray's job more than this guy, and I trust Sexton to do Sexton's job more than this guy. So the guy gets on at, you know, 74, 75 minutes and doesn't have a chance to impact anything. Yeah,
the game's already decided in whatever direction it's going.
Like Joey Carberry had that, ultimately what won us the game. There was that great Joe Schmidt move, but Joey Carberry's try, that's an example of something that just a dynamic player can do with just pure X factor. It was just heads up, balls behind me, two lads.
It was two loose passes, in fact, that got us there.
You know, run in between these two lads, accelerate through the contact and see what happens, and he explodes through it, catches the two boys off, and then he's gone. He's made a try, and that's like he was on the field by accident. I don't think the starting team, that's not a try that's in Joe's script, and yet it won us the game. And there has to be sort of an appreciation of that, of just sort of getting guys getting guys into space, shaking up the game a bit.
For sure. But it's a good idea if you need to come from behind, as we were critical of before. It's like you need to be presenting a new picture, because if your finishers are coming off the bench to do the same thing that's already been not successful for the first 60 minutes,
they're just going to do it less effectively than the starters.
So there are obviously, those are kind of the criticisms that we've come in just eyeballed from our seats watching this Ireland team. I suppose we just hope for there to be more endeavour in terms of that distribution area, and probably like it would be nice to see us get a few more of those cheap tries, or seemingly cheap tries, compared to the absolute bludgeoning exercise in precision execution that we tend to have to go through to get those scores. It'd be nice to be able to just dynamically pilfer a few as well.
A wonderful contrast between the second and third tries in that department. You know, there's one that's come, you know, right off Joe's playbook. We do X off first phase,
which is excellent.
It's
that's
great,
still a great weapon,
super thing to have in the arsenal. The NFL playbook of Joe Schmidt, and then the other one is just, hey ho, things are going wrong. Schmidt's playbook's turned, and there goes Joey. He's down the pitch, he's gone. Forget about it, and it's try time, and you know, the same amount of points on the board.
Indeed,
and that is something that the All Blacks lean on,
do all the time. And that's actually one of their main winning factors. Is just they can be having off days and do routinely and still snatch wins from just those few tries that they manage to just nick heads up.
And certainly, if you want to be winning World Cups, that's one thing that I would encourage them to do,
because it is impossible to be as on and as physical as is required for this Ireland team with this blueprint to be successful on a 7-game win streak basis. In that
the 7 games is a bit of a misnomer, though. It's like it's a win over Scotland in the first round,
then a bit of a tapering off,
and then it's the 3 games in a row. It's quarterfinal, which will be brutal no matter who we face, which will be one of those, you know, great epic games
where
people will go down injured, scrum halves will end up on the wing, we'll eke it out by 2 points, and then we'll have to play Wales in a week's time.
That's the blueprint, that's the hope.
But I mean, like how big a recipe for disaster is that for Ireland? If you look at recent modern Irish rugby history, an epic victory followed by a game against Wales. There's only one outcome there. It's a loss to Wales.
It normally is.
Smiling Gatland.
Yes.
And that's it's certainly a thought. In the more short term, narrow view. The only other thing that I would say is that they still haven't seemed to vary up their exit, which is one thing.
Which is a concern, especially when Connor's not, Murray's not kicking as well as he has been. To try and mix that up would obviously be beneficial. But that's probably all our touch on. Scotland, we didn't really touch on as much as we should have.
We probably not as much as we should. We sort of went off on our Ireland criticisms, but Ireland, from Scotland's perspective, they're just not on the level at the moment that they should be. And while Finn Russell every game is more and more impressive, he's constantly enamoring himself to me. He looks way more mature. His reading of the game, both like that Carberry read was great, but also just his reading of the game in general. Like the only way to really get him off is to trap him. I still like the idea, and I think you will see it at some point, of guys, whether it's going to be in Racing colours or Scotland colours, I don't know, but teams are just going to be presenting false pictures to him because he really reacts off what he sees the defence doing, and you're going to see guys, racing out of the line,
inviting the kick,
and then the winger just drops off and catches the kick, and you're going to see you've seen bits and bobs of it, but that's probably the best way to play him. But he's operating on a level right now where stock defences won't work, and it's a shame to see him playing with such a flaccid backline outside him, and that's really what it was. Very poor.
What do you think of Johnson? Johnson got his
wasn't a problem, but it was more cumulative than that. Gregor Townsend, to be fair to him, put his hand up after the game and said, listen, it's on me, I'm the attack coach, we actually got a lot right, we stood up a bit at set piece, I didn't hate our defensive structure bar one or two mistakes, but it was our attack, we never got going for more than one or two phases.
Before the error came, and
that's and look, it's good honesty from Gregor. I like Gregor a lot. He's made.
It is also progress, probably part of some of the their defense or their attack even has always, certainly from a Six Nations sensibility, kind of felt like it's a very low percentage one in terms of how you look at it, where it's like inviting the high tariff, high skill, or low tariff, high skill option a lot to unlock teams, because it's very focused on getting around rather than going through, sometimes before they've even earned it. So some of those mistakes are coming phases 1 and 2, where like a little bit more patience was probably what was needed there, but it's not really the mantra they're going for. So there's probably a little bit of that leads into it, I think, especially when I'm not making excuses for that full performance, because there were across the board just a few uncharacteristic errors that are always going to be jarring, and then losing someone like Stewie Hogg as well, dent their confidence so early on.
Obviously massive, and we'll get into that now just in a moment. But mentality wise though, it's just, you could compare and contrast them to what England did to Ireland last week, up in their faces, screaming every play. This is what I just keep going back to, is that they had no reason not to be extremely motivated for the game, and yet they just seemed passive. I mean, when you go back to that victory in Murrayfield last year against England, the electricity in the ground, that was one of my favourite games of rugby. But they were doing all kinds of great things. They exposed the English problem at the centre straight off a line out, with Hugh Jones running in from outside centre, a good sweeping line, right, penetrated between the two English centres. Beautiful pass from Laidlaw. They just asked none of those questions from Ireland. They didn't find space, they didn't work space, they weren't aggressive enough from the off, and they didn't seem to have. I mean, it's hard to tell what plans they had, but just to have been so, as you say, jarringly off in a Six Nations that they really perhaps should have been looking to win, and against an Ireland, absolutely. I mean, how many years now have they been on the periphery? And I mean, Hamish Watson's loss is obviously massive. As you say, Hogg going down, and they at their most free flowing and at their best off counter attack from some of Ireland's loose kicking. That was when they were most dangerous.
Which is very much Hogg territory, with where they want.
And Hogg is in good form. Hopefully he's going to be okay. I haven't heard an update on that, but hopefully he's going to be okay. And but it's bizarre seeming, and they just, to me, then they just look at a little bit at sea. I wouldn't I don't know what's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them lose in Paris now after that. Hopefully that won't happen. I mean, France are definitely all over the place, but
they can rally and do a once-off physical domination. As if Scotland arrive that kind of flat, which they have done away from home too often as well, they could be like a shadow of themselves. And
they were shadowing themselves last
week. They were. Part of that now was some of the suffocating work Ireland did.
I thought it was from the kick-off though. Within a couple of big tackles.
Well, certainly when you're comparing it to that England performance of last year, it's a no comparison thing in terms of just where their heads were at, where the whole feel and the ground was. Comparatively, no, it did. You're right in saying it just felt a little flat, which for such an open attacking team, like we were billing it as such a wonderful match of a clash of styles. We didn't quite get to see that game unfold because like Scotland were obviously poor for unclarifiable reasons. I can't put my finger on it quite. Ireland were citing things like just a disjointed quality of the game. I'm thinking it's kind of nerves, but also just a little bit of confidence being shot because just of the manner of their loss the week before in terms of where all of their stuff was exposed. It's like hard to have confidence in the system before going through it again slowly and working that back up.
And from Scotland's perspective, I mean, you know, how vulnerable would Ireland have been if they had got a couple of early tries?
True. Yeah.
They're just, and that's what was missing, is that ruthlessness, and it's a mentality thing. It's a team that wins things versus a team that doesn't win things.
Yeah. And
Scotland right now, for all of their talent, and they do have a good mix of talent, and I imagine as the group spends longer together this year, you know, they will get a bit more cohesion. Obviously, you know, your Gilchrists and your McAnallys are probably a little less used, perhaps, playing with Edinburgh all season to the free-flowing nature of Finn Russell and those kinds of antics. And getting all that to gel together and work together, getting forwards used to offloading and going crazy. I mean, they play with Bill Mata. That shouldn't be too jarring for them.
Sure.
But in spite of all of that quality, it's just there's a mentality problem. Like the winning side sees those moments and sees the day and go on to push forward and threaten trophies. And Scotland's challenges up as
much as I like Greg Laidlaw and do rate him a lot as a captain. I wasn't enamoured with that post-match chat. Ref centric kind of blame game stuff. It annoys me when I hear it out of Cheka and Wallabies, which I do often as well, but it's never a good sign to be blaming the ref.
No.
And like even when there's cause to, I don't like I hear it from a coach and what it reflects about the team that he's coaching in general, or specifically players as well. Like whenever there's an Ireland game where the ref, where there's maybe like one or two questionable calls, which is nearly every game, to be honest, you can always question one or two of the calls, and like Roman Watt is an awful ref who's dreadful in all games.
We didn't touch on the scrum factor.
The scrum, this is it. Like I'm thinking, it's like it's not that he's biased in any way. It's just that he's a bit loose and wrong very often, that it causes that kind of confusion on both sides. And the ruck ball was sloppy. The offside line wasn't being policed with anywhere near the for both teams with anywhere near the kind of really hard lining that it should have been. There's very little communication from him to keep that clear, so you get away with things. That's probably why defences were kind of getting on top a little bit for large parts of that game too. But the scrums by the end, there were many Irish penalties that were ignored for just scrums getting incinerated and nothing being given.
And for them to be given, you know, what was waiting basically for the scrum to reach its natural conclusion,
which is dangerous.
So it was going on, then the bind was broken at the front row, and that's the point at which a penalty is conceded. And yet, you know, it just wasn't moving forward fast enough. Pot was at the back going, use it. So Ireland were going, okay, we'll have to keep shoving here, and eventually, you know, the guys would go to turf, and then the scrum would keep driving, and that's where injuries happen.
Exactly.
So that was very jarringly poorly reffed. And it did cost Ireland a couple of decisions, but as I'm saying, like
it never is said by and in fact I think I did see Schmidt's interview it's always like throwing water on that fire before it even happens. It's saying like, oh look, you know, test arena, it's always very quick, it's 30 blokes running around, it's tough for one man. Like it's always that kind of chat, which I do just much prefer, because you need to be inward looking when after defeat, especially. It's like there's no
you gotta control the controllables.
You can't control the ref. You can play the ref a little bit, you can game the ref somewhat. Good captains are great at it. Alan Wynne-Jones exemplary at it. But Sexton less so when he has to wear the captain's armband as well. So is Faz.
I think Rory Best is okay.
Rory Best is okay as well. Like, the out halves doesn't seem to work, especially when they're kind of taskmaster.
Depends on the out half. Farrell and Sexton are
they're
specific
two
guys.
very alpha dudes who are just going to be like driven by every moment in the game, and as such they're barking orders at their back line, and now they're barking at the ref, and it's like, don't bark at the ref. Yes. But you're barking at the ref, and it's like, that's going to offend the ref. So I wasn't impressed with that chat from Greg Laidlaw. Obviously it's just after the game, but it's like you're talking about in terms of citing mentality. I think that's like a symptom rather than maybe.
You're definitely right. You're definitely right. I've been in teams like that where
you can even easily the whole game, the whole team can get this victim mentality halfway through a game.
Yeah, and you're under your own posts, having conceded your fourth try, and everyone's bitching about the ref.
Yeah,
and it's just like, guys,
come on,
we're getting creased.
This is a recipe for a fifth try.
Yeah, indeed.
So that was unimpressive.
Yeah,
but also, just you were going to make the point before we move on from this game, which we should, of just between the Hogg injury and the Sexton going off, that there's just that type of play.
I want to talk a little bit about that exactly, the damage that's potentially being done to the game by these. It starts like it's a broad conversation, safety in rugby. We just had a report out this week about motor neuron disease, apparently 8 times more common in contact sports. I think it was probably possibly done with an NFL connotation. I know there's a couple of NFL players have it. Obviously Hughes van der Westhuizen has it, but I think it was actually rugby, this study, because I read in a few articles about it that it was 8 times more likely, was the stat that came out of it, to have motor neuron disease if you're in rugby.
Is it a former rugby player or a former professional rugby player? Do you know?
I don't.
Okay.
I wish I had more details. It's just it's not the whole point. It's just it's a broader context of which we talk about this. The other one is the Falau Faianga, the Australian hooker. Good player, had to retire from multiple concussions in the week, and he was talking about he was at, I think, his brother's wedding, and he actually had to be held up at the altar.
Kevin McLaughlin, former Leinster player as well, he had the same retirement issue, and he's actually very outspoken now about he's one who's on board with the below the nipple line tackle. That's one of his that he's trying to advocate for. I'm not entirely sold on that one specifically, because I just dynamically don't see how it'll work indeed in the context of the game. But things like the Sexton, like what we're talking about from this game,
exactly.
As examples of it,
pivots to the weekend, I thought was a lot of people were bitching about the poor quality of the second half. And I was just sort of pondering and musing. It's like, it was significantly worse than the first. It was significantly less interesting from just a neutral perspective.
Sure,
there was a lot of mistakes. There was a lot of slow tempo, and I think unquestionably the game suffered from having the two superstars
of each team.
There are some other superstars in each team, but the two real superstars, your World Player of the Year and your
they're also kind of like living embodiments of what that team is about.
Indeed. the two box office guys who people are going to be tuning in to look at, Stuart Hogg and Johnny Sexton, both left the field, and to my mind they both left the field because of cynical targeting that's going on defensively. I don't think I think unquestionably. I think the Peter O'Mahony one is a little more clear cut, because it was actually just genuinely illegal play that should have been pulled up. And it's curious, should it just be a penalty? A lot of people are saying like it should just be a penalty. It's just a late hit. It's low. For me, there's no arms in it. There's just something about the shot, the late shot, that people don't appreciate, where you're catching guys who aren't expecting to be hit, or who are a little limp in their bodies, like they're not braced for the hit. They're being caught cold. And like that one on Stuart Hogg, when you see the angle adjust and he drops the shoulder and he leans in,
the elbow.
You heard described as just like a bit of niggle, a bit of this, a bit of that.
It's very dirty, very effective. Cynical play.
Effective is one word for it. Like what he's doing, I think he knows full well who's kicking that ball. It's Stuart Hogg, and I think he's trying to hurt him. And another word for hurt is injure him, be it one way or another. Like I don't think that Peter O'Mahony genuinely thinks I don't want Stuart Hogg on the pitch, maybe, but it's a part of it.
You want him a yard slower.
You want him weaker. You want him hurt. And
same goes for Sexton as well. The props aren't going to injure him, but they're also going to make sure that if he's going to take it to the line and be as flat as he is, I'm going to hit him.
They're kind of like injure and hurt like the words do a lot of work. It feels very dirty. Like I got no issues. They're out there to hurt him.
Yeah.
And it's the injury is a consequence of the hurt. They're not too pushed.
Yeah.
They know that it will hurt. They know that either a Sexton that gets creased by me late, or a Sexton that gets taken out of the game is going to weaken Ireland. And I just like back in the old days, you got targeting of fly halves.
You still do.
You still do, but you could respond. You could like the old school sort of, because there's a counter to this, because essentially none of what Scotland did by the law is illegal. None of they were all committed, as it were, but they were never trying to play a guy on the ball. There was never a sense of that. Sexton was giving the pass. They were just making a shape so to seem like, okay, I can't pull out of this, and then hitting him after he released the ball. Cynically, just he's there. I can sort of legally hit him. I'm going to do as much damage as I can. That was the play, and get him out of the play, get him on the ground. And it's not illegal by the law book, but it's pretty cynical, I think. And
as to pivot back to that point in terms of those concussions, it's becoming less tenable as we're focused on tackle laws, as we're focused on concussions, head injuries, high tackles, aerial collisions, all being looked at as far as player safety is concerned. The fact that 10s more often than not, and like Johnny Sexton's quite a big fella for 10. But
it's not just 10s either. Like Stuart Hogg is the same. I think it's the same.
He's the key playmaker thing. Yeah, you're going to have these dainty, small playmakers, skillful guys, and they're going to be lined up, and particularly in the 10 channel more so than Hogg, they're going to be lined up against front row forwards a lot of the time, and they're going to be the ones hitting. And there's like such a discrepancy of weight there that and as well as like just the kind of ballistic laws of the two of them crashing into each other. There's going to be a loser of that contact. And as you were saying, or kind of touching on, in years gone by, it could have been like sorted out off the ball in other like dirty dark arts kind of ways, where it's like, oh, you hit our fly half off the ball, right, next ruck I'm going to like maul you in a very also illegal fashion.
I'm going to turn around and hit you in the head. But that's the point, is that like nowadays if a team decides to target your 10, like because a lot of people who will stick with it, this is rugby, it's a man, you have to be able to take it. The bottom line is, you first as a team you've no recourse. Basically. If this big guy decides to smash your 10, like that's it, and he's just going to keep doing it. Well, the ref isn't going to help you, and if you try to intervene in any way, the ref is going to hinder you. You're going to get pulled up on it. So it's just like I don't know that Phil Bennett could have survived in the modern game. The guys are getting so huge. Like the Willie John McBride was considered a beast. What was he, 6'2"? You're getting 6'6".
Courtney Laws,
chopping
Laws 10s in half.
And look at when he's in the ball, it can be it's a fair play to play a guy in the ball. It is a tough sport, but it's those cynical shots that are coming in late, targeting of a guy after he's given the ball, knocking him onto the floor, that I think is going to have to be looked at, because it's those little cheap shots that guys are getting away with, and guys are deliberately saying, every time this guy touches the ball, I don't care if the ball is gone, he's hitting the floor, he's getting hurt, and it's just. I fear that it could play guys out of the game. That you could see skillful players just not being able to play anymore because they're just going to get killed by super athletes. I don't know. It's
a pet theory.
It's not just a pet. Like it's.
I don't know if I fully agree with it, because like the other thing that Sexton does more so than any other out half, it seems, is just play that close to the gain line and play that square. This was a good point that actually Brian O'Driscoll was making during the week on Off the Ball, that like compared to Joey Carberry, who occasionally takes a late hit as well from 10, he tends to shape his body when he's throwing a pass like he's already over here when the pass is being released, whereas Sexton's literally like square on, the pass is released at the last minute and it's released like that with his body still there, and he's like very courageous, and it's unusual for a 10 in his mid-30s to be playing that way, because more often than not they're standing deeper and like sheltering from that.
I think you're going to start seeing it happen to Owen Farrell as well. I think you already do to some degree, and I think you're going to start to see him taking those knocks. I just like it's I haven't got any answers. That's the point. It's like I'm not trying to articulate a destruction of rugby or anything like that, or I just think that they like.
You were floating.
It shouldn't be the case that being a professional rugby player as a wee man condemns you to the future of, a running back in the NFL. If you're a running back in the NFL, you're gonna retire a broken man more often than not.
Yeah.
Because you're just gonna get consistently creased. Obviously they have probably worse head issues than we do with the helmet issues and everything else, but you're going to just get consistently smashed and targeted and destroyed. You know, there's it's a man's game stuff which exists, but I think it's one of the areas, I'll just put it this way, I think it's one of the areas that they're going to have to be a little harsher on.
Sure. Is
the targeting of players to try, like, to my mind, to try and injure them. And I think certainly Peter O'Mahony should have been pulled up, because I thought it was very cynical play, and it was deliberately on the wee superstar player, and it worked in the sense that it just took him out of the game, and he was probably Scotland's biggest threat and biggest chance of getting into the game.
Yeah.
And likewise with Ireland, you know, had Sexton been on the field, perhaps we would have had more of an opportunity to have a leader on the pitch who might notice how weak Scotland were and might push them back and maybe got the fourth try, which would have kept us alive in the championship.
Yeah.
No, I think but I think that, like, the second half would have been a much more interesting game
had both of those guys
there. It could be an anomaly, but I also think it's a growing trend.
Yeah, and you were floating the idea of, like, something similar to the NFL to bring back that point of, like, an unnecessary roughness or a rough type of call.
The point is I don't have a definitive answer on it. Like I don't know if the nipple line is very much just throwing something out there. Like I don't know to what extent these will work. I just know that it needs to be focused on, because the argument of the people who want to, you know, ban these sports and who want to sell you the horror stories of all the, you know, post-career injuries and everything like that, it becomes a hell of a lot better when our only defence is sort of the libertarian angle, which ultimately we agree with, but like the libertarian angle of just, you know, jouet, you know, you be a man and go out there and fuck it, and whatever happens, and I just man up. Like I don't like the idea that you have to confine yourself to a lifetime of, you know, pain, a post-career lifetime of just pain and broken bodied and perhaps, you know, CTE and whatever else. And it may be the case, but I think we should definitely limit the probability of that happening. I was sort of rambling. Like I wanted to include this video just because I thought it was worth mentioning, but I haven't organised my own thoughts enough to have a definitive answer on it.
Yeah. I would love to hear some of your thoughts on it as well, because it's just something we've been noticing a little bit of late, and especially with the way the game's going and the size of teams now, it's becoming more of a pressing issue. Like, as there's that discrepancy. Exactly.
Like you could have, like, the World Cup is going to be an interesting one just to finish up on. I just think it's like last World Cup was such a, you know, the media from it was as a spectacle, as a, you know, showcase of rugby. It was just glowing. You know, you had this great All Blacks team. You had that Japan story. You had infinite, seemingly, tries roll through the tournament. Great rugby being played. Yeah, great
tier
fans.
2 teams putting it up to other teams. Yeah, it was good.
So much to love.
Yeah,
I fear, like, if for a true, I just have, and this is totally just conjecture, but I just have a niggling feeling that this World Cup may end up getting some bad press, and it'll be revolving around one of two things: either, like, stringently enforced laws, you know, lots of new yellow cards, lots of new red cards
that are game destroying and that soul destroying for some fans, and, you know, it's one of those things where they're trying to regulate the game, or, you know, the reverse opposite of it, where you have, because I think it's every team is starting to do it, where not every team was starting to do it, but playmakers getting taken out. So, you know, you list your who's who, particularly backs and half-backs, and small guys, like your who's who of who are the game-breaking players in the world, your Bowden Barretts, your Johnny Sextons, your Owen Farrells, even potentially like your Nicolas Sanchez's, although there's scarcely a tougher motherfucker in world rugby than him. But you know, those guys, you could see them targeted, and you could see them hit, and you could see them broken, and that could be a narrative that comes from the World Cup as well. Now, it's just a forewarning of it. It's all speculation. They're going like the World Cup, and then by the knockout stages, Bowden, Sexton, Hogg, Farrell, all injured. Faf de Klerk, all gone by the knockout stages. It'd be a weird one.
It's maybe I'm wrong.
Test of depth.
But I'm just a little bit worried for the game and what's coming from it going forward.
It's definitely an interesting one. It's definitely a recurring one in terms of those shots. As Irish fans, it's not just bitching and moaning, because I know Sexton invites that more so than the likes of Hogg, and that's why in terms of those instances, there's one that was clearly worse, and it was the Peter O'Mahony one. And it's like,
no, it's like my point is that, like, I don't actually buy that as an argument for the Dell hit. that put Stockdale into space, sure.
Yeah.
Although, as Joe says, Dell had lined him up from a mile out and was determined to hit him, even at the expense of covering the hole that Stockdale was meant to run through that cost his team a try.
Yeah.
But like it was every time Sexton got the ball, there was a player in front of him who didn't care whether he passed or not. He was going to hit him, put him on the floor. And like it was nothing to do with Sexton. I don't think a lot of them were to do with Sexton's shape. I think it was targeting of him, legal targeting of him, but something that the game perhaps may need to look at, or it could lose all of its stars. I think there's certainly a possibility for that.
But yeah, interesting ones. Anyway, we'll move on because there were another 2 games that happened at the weekend, albeit probably slightly less interesting ones for myriad reasons, I thought, because we'll move on to the Italy-Wales one first. Italy v Wales. They made a raft of changes, Wales, this is, and played a stop-starty kind of game. They were impressive in the first half, with the exception of the fact that they just repeatedly kicked threes and didn't convert all of that pressure into the tries they were good enough for, and then as a result only got out of Rome with a 2 tries apiece win, wasn't it? It was 2 tries each, I think. It was very strange to see them kicking those 3-pointers in Rome, which is like sometimes construed as a sign of respect, sometimes looked at as building a score. What it ended up being was like 12-point return for a lot more pressure than that, and Italy scored a try at the end of that half to get them back into the game, sort of, and then had a nervy start to the second half as a result. I don't know.
Certainly, like it's a very I thought they were all strange calls. Like the idea of showing respect and building a score. I don't really think that they needed to do that against this Italy team.
Well, yeah, they're going to make 10 changes anyway. It's like, what more respect is there to be showing?
They're possibly just getting the team settled, but certainly taking the one for 12.
From 9 points up to 12 points up. That seems way wrong-headed. And it was Jonathan Davis, wasn't he? Who was captain? And obviously, but it must have been
Dan Biggar and him between them.
It seems a strange call, and it's like Dan Biggar, for having been quite impressive in that first half, the wheels kind of came off in the second a little bit before he got replaced, and it's like still no hard and fast like decision on who's in that 10 jersey and what is going to be going forward.
There's a load of those issues with Wales in terms of selection.
Yeah.
You asked me like a few weeks ago.
Because Watkin had a good game from 12.
Yeah.
And is he going to go in there now?
There's a lot of good coming out of them, but there's not a lot of, jersey grabbing great coming out of them. And that's, one of their strengths, certainly, like as you contrast them to Ireland, and I would have pointed that out, is versatility. They can take games to different places, and present oppositions with different styles and different shapes. Absolutely. But I wonder if they need some guys to step up and take that extra step towards being like at halfback. There's a lot of wishy-washy play going on from everybody at scrum half and an out half.
Yeah. And Gareth Davies has come off the bench and played poorly in the first 2 outings, hasn't he? He's been very loose in terms of all of his play.
I thought Aled Davis at 9 was pretty unconvincing as well, and then he was getting harried, and his only real play
kept trying to milk a penalty for it by going to deck and then slowing their already quick ball,
and then lost it a couple of times by pulling shapes and not getting the decision, and Italy picking up the ball and running with it, and it's just. Needed a bit more hustle about him in those moments. And
more physicality. Yeah. Like when you look at the way Dupont can play off the bench and that kind of grit that you can get from scrummy, he was not showing any of that shape. And then conversely, Italy were sort of in the game, I suppose, but they were never going to win it at the same time either. And it was like, to harken back, I'm going to keep it going, the 3-pointer thing. They scored their try. And then before the end of the first half, they had another penalty that could have gone down the corner. It was a tough enough kick that they went for and missed, which automatically makes it the wrong call. But I'm saying the same thing I was saying before. They have to recognise that pretty much their only hope of getting a point out of this game is to score 4 tries. And that is going to be true for every game they play in this tournament. So it needs to be the mantra, and it needs to be like, no, we're not kicking 3. We're going to the corner. We're looking for tries. We may not get the tries all the time. In fact, we probably won't. And that may, like in usual kind of thought, it's like, oh, we wasted a penalty there by not doing it. But it's like, you show me the game that those 3-pointers have ever made a tangible difference to you in the winning of it or losing of it. I can't cite the example of it, because unless you're playing a team on your level, tier 2, if they're playing Georgia as they were, then yes, the 3-pointers are a useful option to try and build a score, try and like things. But no, when there's that much of a discrepancy in those two teams, go for the tries, because there are bonus points on offer for 4 tries, and if you score 4 tries, that's 20 points at least. That's more than you tend to score in these games, so it's giving you more of a chance anyway by net result of scoring that many.
For sure.
So that was an irritation from their performance. The fact that they did that after scoring a try, that would have just propelled them back in, as well as putting doubt in an already kind of disjointed-ish Wales team that were like, there was looseness to their play that I am willing to put down to just the stop start thing. Things like their maul setup,
their line out in general,
sloppy, their line out in general being sloppy. That tends to happen when you make that kind of raft of changes for any team. But then there were other sides of it that were just like those 3-pointers and things. There were just some questionable calls at times, and certainly a real lack of urgency by the last quarter. They despite the fact they were in Italy, they seemed not that pushed about the bonus point through the first half, selecting to do those 12-pointer, those 4 3-pointers, and in the second half, like even towards the end when they got their second try, it was like there was just no urgency out of the boys at all to kick on from there, and it was
potentially tournament costing, potentially
considering England
got their
going
2 easy games out of the way. So now England, as much as Wales and England will both be focused on a Grand Slam, if England get a losing bonus point out of that Wales game, Wales are going into back-to-back weeks. Even on the win, they're going away to Murrayfield and then hosting Ireland.
2 losable fixtures.
If they lose either one of them, you would expect England would win the championship.
Yeah.
So I think it's a mistake, and I also just think confidence-wise it can't be good.
Yeah.
The 10 changes, because they're such a versatile team, you would have thought it would be a strength, because you'd have competition for jerseys can be great, but it's the curious picture at the moment where nobody seems to be grabbing them. I mean, Elliot D was pretty catastrophic in the absence of Ken Owens.
True.
Adam Beard was kind of all over the place.
He had a very poor game actually. Everything he touched seemed a bit wrong.
Yeah,
the lineup wasn't good.
And then in the back line I thought Watkin did have a few useful touches, but in
general
it wasn't pushing the button stuff, and more questions will be answered than were answered in this game, in the England game.
And that's kind of make or break for their season. Like, all of this may be moot if they do that point on England, but it's
certainly no, of all of their big squad and of all their big depth and all the rotating that they have done and can do. Like, you would expect to see guys in a game like this grabbing jerseys, and you didn't see any of it.
No, it very much felt like
still leaves them with a dilemma.
Getting out of their way.
Patchell's stock is rising in his injury.
That's a strange place to be at. And it's true, because Bigger showed the good and bad in his game in one game, and it was far too loose from a guy who tends to be domineering in that 10 jersey. By the end, there were some really ropey plays. Anscombe came on, did some creditable things, was nice, good to identify the chip for that try as well. It just felt there were more, but they left a lot behind there against Italy, an Italy team that are still dodgy in their first up tackles, and the
lack of improvement from them has been disappointing, hasn't it?
A little bit.
None of that.
You know what's one thing that's sort of improved, and this is one thing that leads me to believe that their game in Rome against France is going to be an interesting one, is that they're scoring quite late in the game. Yeah, they're actually look fit enough to put scores in.
They did a bit late last year as well.
Well, this is where we're seeing France be so hopelessly abject in the tail end of games that it's like there's a possibility that this Italy team are fitter than France.
I certainly think, and we'll get on to France, but I certainly think, regardless of the context, if there's 20 minutes to go in a game and it's France are involved and it's 16-all, France are just going to be shot of confidence. Yeah, regardless, the position.
How can they win that game? No, they don't know how.
There's just no way that they're going to win that game. This current French team. It doesn't matter what the teams are, who's playing who, what the context is, whether they were 16-0 down or 16-0 up. If it's 16-all, forget about it. For 20 minutes to go.
It's possible. That's what makes me interested, because there's little signs of growth with Italy. The improvement is one thing, but it's tough to ask of them in a tournament like this when they're up against they're in a shark tank essentially with teams that are and countries that have more of a rugby tradition and have more depth and more just have been of a higher caliber for so long that they're always kind of paddling against the stream, and any minor improvements that they make aren't even noticeable.
Not as visible.
Yeah, they're not visible because they're in losing efforts, which has always been Conor O'Shea's defence, and it's oftentimes comes off as a bit flat, especially after however many losses in a row that they're going through in Six Nations. I think it's 19 Six Nations losses in a row, which is always going to pour fuel on the fire of the arguments of getting Georgia in there and stuff. And it's like, it feels a bit harsh, but it's something that we don't.
Yeah, certainly. Like, as long as O'Shea, essentially what he's doing. What I just hate about the anti-Georgia angle he takes, obviously it's protectionist regarding Italy.
Yeah.
But if you want to make a good faith argument in case of ring fencing, where are you going to put the fence, really?
Yeah.
The fence is not going to be beneath Italy. Let's be honest. It's going to, if you want to make a good faith argument for it, the fence goes beneath France.
The fence goes below. Well, you saw how many Welsh fans were over there. People love going
more than Italian fans. They need to get out of that stadium.
Yeah,
it's miserable.
That is a little side point. Like the Stadio Flaminio was lovely, had a bit of atmosphere to it. Was a nice looking stadium. The Olympic Stadium, I hate Olympic stadiums anyway. The ones with the running tracks and the crowd are so far away, and
they don't fill it. They could move out of Rome.
Yeah,
maybe to up north to a rugby country. I'm sure they have a few decent stadiums up there. Like, it's just, I don't know any.
Well, the best atmosphere I've ever seen at an Italy home game was when they hosted the All Blacks in the San Siro.
Yeah,
and that was unreal.
Can't do that every week though.
Can't do it. Obviously not. No, the interest isn't there, and that would just be an empty stadium. Not
to mention two clubs play their own football there in soccer.
Yeah,
but it's like they need to. I think it's a problem. I thought, like, the atmosphere was utterly flat. The Welsh fans were in there and wanted to sing,
in good voice.
Not that their team would give them much to sing about.
Reverberating around Rome.
It stopped after the first half because of the rugby.
Yeah. They were literally in fine song and then tapered off, and then there was just grumblings and groans.
Yeah,
what's all this?
Musical groans.
Yes. Yeah. Because I like hearing Bread of Heaven go around when it's not in our stadium.
No, I don't think Welsh fans will ever truly appreciate how irritating it is to hear them all singing happily when they're beating you. It's a terrible experience.
I just admire the harmonisation of it all and the fact that there's a swell in the ground. It's great.
It is. It's awesome.
Yeah.
There's no arguing. From Italy's perspective, just a couple more things. I'd like to touch again on the point that I made last week. There's just that I think it was buttressed by the fact that I think a stat came out, TV3 or whatever they're called these days, Virgin Media, covering the rugby in Ireland. They had brought up the stat of sort of percentage of or what each play is. I can't remember how exactly they termed the stat.
Oh yeah, as in like what you're going to use the ball to do. So it's like there's a kicking play or a passing play. What were the options?
I can't remember. Yeah. But the key note that came out of it was of
how often teams
most teams would kick the ball on in terms of phase play on about 15 to maybe 20% of their phases, something along those lines.
It wasn't quite that.
I thought it was
like 8 to 12, maybe
something like that. Anyway, but it was pretty high.
Yeah,
like a lot of.
I think it's increased this year.
Yeah,
it's definitely increased this year.
There's a lot of
more attacking,
a lot of kicking going on.
Yeah,
early phase kicking when they're catching the backfield out. And Italy, it was about I think 3 or 4%.
2%, I think.
2%. There you go.
And they just do not kick the ball.
And that's because they don't they lost Tito Tabaldi obviously in the first week.
He does do a lot of box kicking.
Yeah, and without him, they've had this lad Palazzani in, who's been much of a muchness really.
He's a bit loose, to be honest.
But Alan at 10 is to my mind not a 10, and it's just becoming more obvious watching him. Make some good ball in hand plays and run some sharp lines. He's a distributing 12. He looks it and he plays it and he acts it and he doesn't kick the ball. Yeah. And when he is asked to kick even off the tee, it's ropey at times.
Yeah.
And it seems like an obvious answer to me seems to be to bring Carlo Cana back in. I know he's very much fallen out of favour. He's with Zebra. They're not going that well. He has a decent boot on him. He has a capped international, and I would love to see Alan move to 12, where they have an issue anyway.
Yeah.
And then get Cana in there at 10 to kick the ball and give them a bit more variety. Get them playing down the opposite end of the field a bit more. And then also have, what could be a very interesting centre partnership in Allen and Campagnaro.
It's true. Yeah. Defensively suspect as well, but no more so than what the Scots are putting out there these days.
No more so than what they're putting out every
True
week
enough as well. So it's there's definitely potential in that. Tommy Allen is running the ball very well.
He is.
And
I wouldn't take him out of
the team at all. No, I'd keep him in there. But you're probably right in saying that they need to be utilising that kicking game more than they are, because as admirable as it is that they're trying to run the ball a bit more, and how refreshing it is that, like, talking of improvement, if you zoom that out from a 10-year point of view, like, no comparison, they have improved. Like Italy from 10 years ago, they couldn't move the ball
That's
at
right,
all.
yeah,
They couldn't get, not only from one side of the pitch to the other, they couldn't put two passes together without some kind of mistake or mess in there, and it's like that no longer is the case. So there's obvious signs of improvement there. You have players like Campagnaro who look great ball in hand, that like seem to understand how to run with a rugby ball. That's obviously positive. They have that like it's
important. South Africans like Bram Steyn making awesome plays.
His game, actually, he needs a shout out. He had the best game I've seen him have in an Italian jersey. He was all over. He was also man of the match. He should have been.
Yeah,
like
that's a strange
in a weird performance where there was nothing really doing from a Welsh point of view, and yet that was where it's just
went to Josh Navidi
because he was on the winning side. But it was like, if you're talking back rows specifically, Bram Steyn put in a monster shift where he was nicking lineouts and nicking balls and making tackles. And
exactly.
It's like,
if the man of the match is worth anything, you know, you got to give it to the guy who's making plays out there.
Yeah, and it often happens actually that a number 7 from a losing side can have a great game. I think it happens. Okay. It happens an awful lot. I've seen it in many different kinds of teams that like a whole rake of them can be playing badly, and yet their 7 seems to be showing a bit of hustle, but it's all in vain.
Yeah,
it's like it's all just one way traffic anyway. But he's trying. Oh, he's always trying.
Yeah.
But he definitely had a monster game. I was actually going to talk about the fullback that they're missing in terms of just that extra bit of spark in the back line as well.
What's his name? I can't remember his name.
Minosy.
That's it. Matteo
Minosy. And as creditable a job as Hayward did last week, he had a few suspect plays this week, for sure. It wasn't quite his week. That tackle needed to be made on Liam. I know Liam Williams is all elbows and knees, and he looks like a painful guy to try and tackle, but you still have to try to tackle him.
Channeling his Aussie roots there.
Yeah.
I've liked him as a player as well, but and that's what you talk about, the first of tackles. That's got to be something that's emphasised in training. That's got to be something that it galvanises them the way that defensive tack against England did.
Yeah.
First of all, I think they should be defending with a lot more, gusto.
Yeah, their line speed is sometimes very passive. And it just allows teams to execute plays that are far too intricate to be working really. Like a lot of the time, you can fool yourself with an ill-timed Italy game into just these kind of passive, deep, over elaborate moves that seem to work because they're allowed to, and then you come up against a defense that's actually bullish and there to take you out of it, and it comes unstuck very quickly. And like with them, their line is sometimes a bit passive, but it very often doesn't get to the point where their defensive system is tested because they've already just missed a tackle. Like it wasn't that he wasn't there, he just missed the tackle and now it's a try. So it's like, what are you going to emphasize? It's not going to be more systems oriented stuff. You just need to be making your tackles 1 to 15, 1 to 23,
but also just putting guys in better position. Like if guys are missing tackles on the back foot so often, playing drifting off people, you got to get the defense on the front foot. And I know in the case of your Hayward, that was obviously a case where he was the fullback and he was trying to cover a 2-on-1, so he's always going to be moving backwards.
True.
But in general, the missed tackles that are coming from them, you'd like to see them being given a bit more license to push up out of the line.
Sure.
But that said, teams give them no respect, so they just move it straight wide against them. So it's a difficult one.
Yeah.
And certainly those missed tackles aren't going to generate any respect from opposition.
No, they aren't.
The game for them is the French game. That's when things get interesting.
Yeah, and it's like, it's one, as I said, there's a possibility that they're fitter than them, because certainly both of their teams are playing in the Pro 14, and that is certainly a pacier game, or a pacier league than the top 14 is currently, as we were highlighting last week. And it's looking at their fitness levels in the tail end of Six Nations games now, for the last couple of years even, they still seem to be there to play a bit of ball. They score a few tries in those late exchanges. I just wish, and I've highlighted it at the beginning end, they need to be recognising that in the first half they need to be trying to get 1 try at least, hopefully 2 if they can at all, even if it means leaking 3 or 4, get 2 and then rely on that at the end to try and grab your 2 tries at the end, and then you're getting points out of these games, and that would be enough of a tangible improvement to point towards progress. Like, they registered 1 point in the Six Nations last year. They have to be hoping to outdo that, and maybe a win against France would do that all off the bat, and it wouldn't matter. But it's
the same. Like, I would say the same thing for Japan this year ahead of the Ireland game. I think they play Ireland ahead of playing Scotland, and Scotland's going to be their big game to get out. But if by some fluke of luck, bonus points are to matter. That game against Ireland, and I'm pretty sure Japan probably will approach it in that way.
It plays into their style of play a lot.
But
as well.
You wouldn't want to see them
taking three,
going 3-0 up against Ireland.
Yeah.
Like, you would want to see them thinking, like our first priority is we need to get something out of this match. Let's try 4 tries.
Yeah.
Because Ireland are a big bullying, bruising monster of a team, and we're not used to seeing anything like them.
Yeah.
Let's just try and run, see if we can score some tries and get them on the board. Every time we concede a try, forget about it. Next play, we're still trying to score tries, score tries. It
feels like the sensible approach for any underdog, in a
like
tournament
a large
when
underdog,
bonus points matter. It feels like your most likely chance for any success out of the game at all.
It's also your most likely chance to rattle them.
Yeah. And therefore, like, you're more likely to nick a result if you're and obviously every team's going to go into a game hoping as well as kind of thinking that they can win it, because it's a rugby game. It's 15 men against 15 men. On the day they can. And like Japan have evidence like the South Africa game in history to cite as far as that's concerned. So you go in with that in mind. But what's your most likely way to get anything out of the game is through tries, and you're also more likely to put yourself in a winning position once you've scored those 4 tries.
Exactly.
Like that's enough points accrued to be challenging for most games.
And certainly, like, if you're you want to be thinking, if you're Ireland, like if you're this is the way to flip it. Like, if you're even, we'll say, who are Italy playing this week? Ireland are playing Italy in the week to come. If Ireland early doors are looking a bit ropey and start conceding yards, and Italy get a penalty and they take 3 points, they're 3-0 down, Ireland are still not that settled, Italy break out again, get another penalty, take another 3 points. Ireland still aren't wounded. You know, they're 6-0 down, they've started pretty poorly. Then they all of a sudden, you know, they get a penalty, they kick down, they get settled into the game, they get another penalty, they kick it in the corner, and then they take the lead. In spite of being, you know, at sea for 10 minutes. You got to punish, especially when you're a lesser team. If you see a
little ray of hope, a weakness in
you
this
gotta press on the throat. And certainly Italy need to be more appreciative of that.
Yeah, for sure. And then in the context of the World Cup, you're right in saying you'd hope more tier 2 sides would take on that mantra as well.
Approach,
it's certainly something that I'm really fully converted to the idea that it's the only hope, it's the only way, because I've seen 3 points, 6 points, 9 points become nothing but a cricket score the other way. Like, it's not a recipe for success.
Whereas if it's 7-14-21 and it still becomes nothing, a cricket score the other way, there's always that last phase play that can grab you a 4th try in a point.
Indeed, so it just seems to make good mathematical sense, as well as being the right thing for the goodness of the game as well, because I'd love to see tier 2 teams throw more caution to the wind as well. Like, a tier 2 team coming with a negative, spoiling, slowing tactic, as well as never working, it makes just uglier games.
For sure. For sure.
So with that, we'll probably pivot on to the England game, which there's a bit to say, but I don't know if it'll be too long. We've kind of previewed it in more detail and got quite a lot right, I think, with our preview. There's just one team's at the races here, and it's not France. Like, England have come here to win. That opening day performance in Dublin is gonna really, and has already really bolstered them in confidence. They've got a few key men back. We saw last year some of the limitations of their game plan without some of those men, as well as a few just tactical errors, things like the issues in the back row, things like the issues at 10 in terms of not selecting Farrell. Although in part of their big winning streak it was Ford at 10 and Farrell at 12, I think they're still just much better off deciding this now that Farrell is their elite 10, which he is, and they have stumbled upon, as you said, like, a very, very good centre partnership.
Indeed,
with us drawing that into question, rightly so, because there were Ben Teo's there.
Eddie Jones said last week that had Ben Teo been fit, he would have picked him. What a different world and game that could have been, you know. Like Tuilagi and Slade, excellent balance to that. Excellent kind of threat in Tuilagi being there. Their pack is so big and mobile anyway, with Vunipola back, with Mako putting in loads of stints. Obviously, he's actually out now for this week, which is a shame. He's out for the tournament.
It's such a shame, because they were just like having that kind of a pack for them with a number 7. This is one of the other errors of last year fixed, even in the absence of Underhill. Tom Curry, young 20-year-old, he's getting the nod now. Something that would not have happened in years gone by.
No, indeed.
Even in Premiership clubs, out and out number 7s just don't get this. Don't get.
You would have seen James Haskell wearing the jersey in times gone by. Decent player as he is, it's just, you know, he was never a natural 7, and it was just all Chris Robshaw.
It's like he's not built for it.
He was always missing from them, and now they have not one but 2 young, bullish guys who attack the breakdown. So a lot is being fixed. They attack very crisply. we're yet to see what they look like with slower ball in attack,
is key,
getting spoiled, and then first of all, like what needs to get made is that their offensive breakdown isn't giving teams a lot of chance at the moment.
True,
they're killing that breakdown. And
that's one of those things where it's like it feels like Eddie Jones was somewhat half right as well as half wrong in his appraisal of that, his rather cheeky appraisal last year when he was talking about no, you're talking about rugby from 10 years ago when he was addressing that 7 issue. It's like, no, whoever's at the ruck first, they need to clean out. It's like, that's something that still is true as far as the offensive breakdown is concerned for them. Like, whoever is there is doing a good job, and it's 2 men this year as opposed to sometimes lazily 1 man last year, which was a problem, that they were getting a little bit too lazy with it, and then number 7s were having such purchase, even good, bad, any kind of number 7 against them was getting good purchase from just that. They fixed that this year, but they still needed 7 for the defensive breakdown. It was a frustrating comment because it was just it's like if he was asked about getting some crisper passers into the side, he was like, oh, that's crazy talk. You're talking about rugby from the 70s. Everyone has to pass. Sure.
It's like, okay, everyone does have to pass, but there's natural passes of a ball, and there's also natural defensive breakdown 7s. Guys who are very natural at honing in on the turnover of the ball, slowing the ball, slowing it, doing all that work,
which is something that like compared to last year, where that was such a constant source of frustration for them, as well as improper selections in the back line, and as well as just lacking some of that game-breaking power that they have now through Tuolagi, through both Vunipolas, through the Mero Itogis who are there. There's just options to break it up, because when they're strictly reliant on just their system and their shape without those kind of talismanic players, it comes unstuck a bit for them, and then they get shook as far as confidence is concerned, because every now and then they just do need that power play that comes out of nowhere, and they need to be bludgeoning teams.
They make it forward as well, and then they know what to do with it. Yeah. What they do with it is, they sort of meander over to the left side and play into Johnny May.
Johnny May is over there. He's going to score tries all day if we keep kicking it to him.
We talk about Ireland playing Stockdale into the game. They do a great job of putting him in space, and whether it's with the boot or with the pass, they always...
It's been with the boot a lot this year. They have kicked a lot of ball, and they did at the weekend again. Kicked a lot of ball. Now, like, that's going to be invited by things like last week. It was the selection of Henshaw at fullback that disjointed the Irish normally very rigidly set back 3.
France saw your Henshaw and raised you a Houget.
France and 2 centres. It was 1 Houget and 2 centres.
Pinot is a winger.
is a winger and a centre. Like, he's a quality rugby player. I don't have as many worries. And in fact, despite the fact that all of the tries were scored by Johnny May on that wing, I don't actually think Pinot had too bad of a game, and I thought he was deserving of his try when he got it. But it's all just rudderless from France, and crazy when you think of it.
I mean, the exasperating point that you have to make out of both sides of your mouth is like the constant chopping and changing of the team is killing them. Because they've no cohesion. They barely know each other as a team. They can't. Everyone's learning the systems.
It feels like when you're watching the under-20s or something. And it's like these boys have been in camp for 2 weeks, and now here they are, and it's just like.
The other thing is that they're still not getting the selection right amidst it all. Like, the changes they make are wrong-headed. Like, and they have to make a decision as to whether or not they're going to be the team of Bastro or not. Like, why is he in one week out the other? Like, last week it was all speed. We're like, the reason the rationale between the centres and the wing is that we're going to flood this area with a load of ball players and try to exploit numbers advantages in minimal space, and it can work with a bit of flair and a bit of offloading. But and then your ability to start the game at any kind of pace disintegrates with Bastro, and it only exacerbates your fitness issue and your speed issue.
Yeah, the other argument is if you're going to be picking a backline that's determined to get centres on the ball in the wing channels as much as that, and move the ball as wide as quick as that all the time.
What's Bastro doing there?
Well, what's Bastro doing there? But also, why are you picking the heaviest pack in the history of world rugby to do that?
Exactly.
Like, if you're going to play that kind of game, surely you're going to pick a quite light, mobile.
And it's not like they're short of options, and that's the point, is that they have infinite options. They seem to just create this concoction of madness that doesn't work together. Like, if you want to put Bastro onto your team, like, I get it. I think there is a competence approach where you have your Bastro on your team, you have your heaviest pack in the world, and then you have Camille at 10, and
you kick the ball.
And you slow the game.
He doesn't seem to be allowed to kick the ball from 10.
Yeah, and that's what he does.
A kicking 10.
And that and that's it. And it's just exactly. There doesn't seem to be any appreciation for what they'll be best at and how they can best manage the game. Like last week, they started it with a gratuitous knock on, but there doesn't seem to be any sort of we'll put the ball, we'll make them exit all day, we'll put a bit of pressure on them, we'll attack their set piece, every time we get it we'll try and pin them back. England's backfield isn't necessarily stellar at covering the ball. I mean, Elliot Daly for me isn't a natural cover of the ground at fullback. Their wingers can push up a bit, and it's yet to be tested. It's one of those, like, the coaching that's going on in France at the moment is sort of crazy.
Oh, it's compared it's all the more shameful given just the contrast we're having, where the quality of coaching across the board has increased to such an extent, such a ridiculous extent, that there's so much detail. It's becoming more and more akin to things like NFL as far as how far in advance plays are constructed, and you can see France, these tries that are born of like 5 phase and 7 phase sets, and then repeating, so you can have like a 30 phase try that involve 2 or 3 of these little set moves in it, and it's like France just have none of that to offer. Could not be more
alien to the French. Like, as we talk about rugby in the NFL context more and more, France is the French national rugby team is the farthest thing from an NFL team. And they're sort of a bastardized version of the All Blacks in terms of how they approach the game, but they haven't.
It's fast and loose and heads up.
Yeah, but they haven't got nearly the same professionalism, or even
they're not fit enough to execute it now against proper teams as well. They can catch them cold for 20 to 40 minutes, but then they are going to fade. And systems based teams will just grind it back out and get the win against them more often than not. Like, it's 3 wins from 13 now for Brunel, and however many different 15s in amongst all that and different combinations, and it's just like
different combinations of coaches, but also just very few nuggets of positivity, all of which have just come from individual plays from players that he's likely to throw out next week as well. So it's just
you'd hope to have. There's no identity to the team. One week they play one way, and then the next they play in a completely different way, and all of it in losing efforts. And this showing in Twickenham, it was just it was one of their worst ever. One of their worst ever. They were never in the game. One ray of hope in terms talking about individuals. Dupont off the bench, excellent. Looked brilliant. I'm a big fan of that guy from Toulouse as well. Like, I'm just I love his kind of combative nature as a scrummy. He's one of those little terriers who's going to work all day, and did create a lot, and
he did
really kind of sparked some good play towards the tail end. But England were just all over them as far as just being worlds apart as far as all of that's concerned. Coaching, some tactics, they were isolating obviously on that wing, playing Johnny May into space, winning their quick ruck ball. But then some of the stats that emerged, like Van Mahina made 4 tackles in the game. 4.
Not getting through a lot of work.
What is going on there? Like, that's mental. Compare that to Makavunapola's like 20 plus. How many did he make against Ireland? It was something like that, like 25 or 26, something crazy. And it's just like, that's what's expected of. Well, it's not. That's probably above of what's expected of a front row forward. But that's the level that these kind of packs are getting to now. You're seeing athletes like James Ryan come in and get through a load of work over an 80-minute shift. And compare that to what's going on in France, where you just see them take plays off constantly and bafflingly, and as well as making stupid decisions that seem born of nothing else than there's no system in place, and we've been playing for an hour, so I guess it's all heads up and crazy now, and fatigue based errors. It's just, there doesn't seem to be a ray of hope for them. The only, and it keeps coming back, but I don't foresee it in this World Cup. But it's like the argument, certainly from a lot of Irish pundits and former players, there's always that lingering memory of like, but this is France. They're one of the best teams in rugby. Surely they must be.
Still have a load of great players to choose from, and that's it. Like, you could still make a French squad that could really have a go at the World Cup and could harass some teams. But they would need to get fitter, and they would need to get organised,
and they would need to have some kind of clarity as to who's playing in the jersey as well. Because the other thing, and this was probably a good point, that's a bit of an intangible as well, but in terms of just the drive and the work, it doesn't feel like when they make mistakes, that doesn't feel like that's what's going to get them kicked out of their jersey. You know, like it feels more arbitrary than that.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, and that's when you see things like Johnny May is running through. He's running just chasing a kick, and like obviously he's quick. He's probably going to win it anyway. But he's running past 3 retreating French defenders who are all kind of half jogging, half running, whereas he's sprinting and he's getting the ball. And it's like, none of that. You don't see that from any of the other teams in the Six Nations. Not even Italy. Like there's a lot of floundering half defensive plays from the guys just really trying to get there and not being there. You see that even from Italy. You don't see it from France. You see a very loose, laissez-faire, relaxed kind of flakiness that is very much associated with the modern iteration of the French national team.
That said, they do, especially at home, like they take it hard when they lose games.
Yeah.
They really go into games trying to win them. They have good positive first halves, but yeah, it's just the actual the top down work isn't being done to get the guys to a position where they can actually win games.
Yeah,
and yeah, it's gonna need a new, fresh approach to the game, probably with a fresh coach from outside France
for the first time in l'histoire.
Yeah.
Yes, let's get out of it. Let's get some fresh eyes in here, and let's actually listen to them. Let's not be like check out Stade Francais kind of buzz where it's like I have to clean house, I have to do all these things, and just have like really rebellion from inside the camp, and just no.
But I actually get the impression that things like I remember hearing Paul O'Connell and Ron Lagarde talking about it a little bit, like saying like maybe things have changed since then, but
certainly the players want to win, and players are understanding. Like, how often have Montpellier lost to Leinster in the last few years? How many stories do many of these teams have of it not going their way in big European games and stuff, and against organised killer teams that, like, it's probably presenting a baffling picture to them just how organised they seem to be from across, and how much chat's going on. Even in the 68th minute they have the plans and schemes that are working to beat us all the time. So yes, let's get us some of that. Let's get some cohesion, some plans, some schemes, and try and execute them, because at the moment they just seem to got nothing.
The 2011 rebellion, like, it was born of the fact that the players themselves were rightly convinced that they could do a better job than the coach. And
they were right.
And they were right, absolutely. But like, if the players tried to rebel and do their own coaching ahead of this World Cup against the kind of teams they'll be facing,
the kind of level that coaching's come to now since that 2011 one. I don't think that would have been enough in 2015 even.
No, they would be shocked. And it would be a harrowing day of lesson learning for them, and they've had enough of them.
They have. So there should be lessons learned at this point. But that being said, and all that being said, England soldier on in very, very impressive fashion.
For sure.
I never doubted that was going to happen, but it was like it was the Johnny May show as well. It was good to see Farrell getting his try as well. I think he's good value for it. It's just been mad to see how much is being got from attacking kicks this tournament. It seems to be something that has been figured out about the shape of Northern Hemisphere defences. There's a lot of purchase to be had from isolating that and having your attacking players chase it really well.
It's one of those things. It's just like the 2015 lessons were all about flashing it wide very quickly. It's a picture Scotland present very often. So the natural evolution was to push the wingers up, have come up very fast, shut off the outside, but also have it covered by the two wingers. And then what does that do? It leaves space in the
backfield, which places a premium on value on players like your Rob Kearneys, who can cover all that space seemingly.
But even so, I mean, it's going to be, it's like if Ireland are to stick with, Ireland, just for an example, are to stick with that system going forward all the way to the World Cup, it's going to be a hell of an ask on Rob Kearney.
It is,
to continue to
surely
do that.
Some of these attacking kicks are going to pay dividends, as they have already against us in that game just gone against England. But also, it seems to be more of a trend than that. Like, England kicked it a lot against that obviously haphazard French back three. There is always going to invite that. But even Wales have got some purchase from that as well. And there's a lot of teams are kicking a lot of ball, and that's something that we don't necessarily see a lot of in tournaments gone by. There's often more of a premium on keep ball and then kick for territory, but this is more like phase one, phase two, attacking.
You got some bombs.
You've got some bombs as well, for sure, but this is a different approach to that. This is like kicking your wingers into
a
the
more
game.
Southern Hemisphere approach to kicking, a Bowden Barrett type approach, which is it's welcome. It's another threat, and it's closer to a threat that you'd be presented with in the World Cup for sure. Southern Hemisphere teams as well.
It's been good for Johnny May.
It's been very good for Johnny May.
He's been bagging meat all day.
Love Johnny May. Quality.
Really good finisher.
Yeah.
But so we'll finish up our Six Nations coverage on that and move on to some of the other news.
We'll start with Rugby Europe. Rugby Europe Championship. Round 1 took place. And no teams as of yet disqualified. Everybody's in the mix.
Well, unless there have been some ineligible players.
Yeah, 6 teams still going as of now, still batting.
Sure.
The one we'd start with was Romania, Georgia. I watched the full game. It was on in advance of the Ireland game, streaming on their website. You have to go and look for it to find it, but it's probably worth doing. Free rugby, and interesting pictures being presented.
For sure.
I thought this was a really curious game. In the first half, Romania were doing a job on Georgia, to be honest with you. That scrum half of theirs is so key to what they do. It's Lobzanidze or I think it's Lobzanidze is how you pronounce it. But he was targeted big time, and they were roughing him up. Every breakdown, they were doing some illegal things, but Georgia liked their slow ball, and Romania's just throwing hands in there. After the play, a few times he was the guy getting rattled. He was getting properly roughed up, and then they had made the scrums a mess as well. It was an Irish reffing, and he was struggling to cope with it. The scrums were just going down. There was never quite that. You saw a little bit in this as the game went on, but for the most part, there was just collapsed scrums and some free kicks going against Georgia, and then a penalty going against Georgia. And it was just, they created a frustrating picture for Georgia in that first half. They couldn't get settled. And it was 6-3 to Romania at half time. The crowd were getting into it. It was
probably not enough points for all that.
No, indeed. And as it happens, it was Lobzanidze himself who really turned it on in the second half and approached. He made a great, he started playing with a bit more speed. He made a great line break that led, I think, to the first try. He was just sprinted down the field. So I think it was off a kick. He just ran and broke through, and then they ended up getting a penalty try off the ensuing couple of plays. And Quickfire got another try. Gorgodze, not Toulon's Gorgodze, our new scrum cap friend Gorgodze. From number 8 was put into space by a bit of lovely play from side to side.
He finished it very well.
Trampled a couple of Romanians and
a little
away he went,
mauling over the top of the last defender, which is nice to see for a guy named Gorgodze.
I was amused to watch the highlights of it because I was watching it live with the Romanian coverage, and I gotta say, I don't speak a word of Romanian, but there was some serious, grumbling going on, some partisan grumbling as the second half was going on. As that went in, it was like Gorgodze, but it sounded like they were musing about double movements or whatever in Romanian. And then I watched the highlights that Georgia posted with the Georgian commentary, and it was like Gorgodze, just jumping up and down and going crazy.
This is what I'm gonna give our usual shout out to Justin Marshall for just how good he is at that, as being not partisan and just watching the rugby unfold and calling it as it is, which sometimes a try scored against your team is just a good try. And that was definitely a good try, and it's something that it really vexes me about watching Irish coverage of any Irish game as well, because it just does annoy me that every try against us is who missed that tackle is the first call, instead of getting a bit of colour into the commentary,
after the tries came in, it was just Romania to kick one to get back into it, and then Georgia got another penalty towards the end to push them away. But in terms of tests for Georgia, it's another curious one. I mean, Romania are a team very similar in mindset to Georgia, and they're just inferior, so they actually can do less with the ball than Georgia can, but it's from Georgia's perspective,
still we did a lot with the ball there, but are we going to be able to do that when the proper tests come?
It's like the Italy point. It's like the Georgia are in that exasperating position of imagine if Ireland only got to play Italy between now and the World Cup, and every week we were hammering them in new creative ways, and it was like, but what's going to happen when we don't have to play Italy? And that's true. That's a disadvantage that Georgia have for sure. It's a welcome reminder for them that their pack aren't infallible, though, that they can be roughed up, and they need to sharpen up at the scrum time and at their pack. That's what their strength is. And also just
probably add more strings to their bow as far as just how to utilise that ball. Don't be satisfied with grinding out 18 points against Romania. That's not many points to be scoring against a team that are over Romania. You probably need to be scoring a bit more if you're going to be beating it's Australia and Fiji in there, and Wales. Tough games, one and all. Very different games, one and all. They're going to need to score some points to win any of them. And
they did manage to drag a game in Cardiff to a standstill.
Nearly won it. And there was an argument that they probably should have won it as well. If we're being brutally honest, that was probably Mr. P try.
They're still burly men. They will be a challenge. They'll be a handful for any pack to deal with. It's true. Yeah. But in terms of going forward in this tournament, they look good now for another, REC slam, I guess. They're playing Spain at home this week, and that'll be
a tough game.
In Tbilisi, I think.
They should have it anyway. But it's like Spain are looking a bit more competent year on year. It was. I suppose we can possibly swivel on to them. They managed to edge out Russia 16-14 in what was a good well fought game. But a few little things, like curious to see a very effective Spanish maul try working, where I wouldn't have normally associated Spain with that kind of in tight detail work, but it was well set up and they got there.
It's one of those simple things that any tier two coach worth his salt would be. Like if you're going to get one thing right, we're going to be able to score from 5 meters out with a maul.
Yeah,
like we're going to just be organised.
So often
we're going to do that.
Any game.
That's going to be one thing that we can do.
Yeah.
And good on them. It was very good.
They executed it well. Yeah.
Perfect, pretty much.
Yeah, and then Russia got back into it with quite a mauling try where they just seemed to win contact after contact, and it was just picking jams for the most part. And then one little dummy from the scrum half and then go, but it was all just like smush. And they are a big team, Russia, by the looks of it. They're physically quite big.
They're gonna be,
come World Cup time, they'll be organised. They'll be dangerous.
Physically prepared is one way to put it. They'll be
is one way. Yeah,
they'll be big, strong, and up for the fight when the World Cup comes around. Now, whether that's going to be enough for them to actually compete with a proper rugby team will be
maybe not.
Remain to be
Might
seen.
Be enough to scare Japan.
Yeah,
it's game 1, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't see it, to be honest with you.
Russia.
Japan have so many more miles in the clock as terms of rugby is concerned.
It's true. Yeah. All evidence thus far points to the idea that it's Japan.
Improved though from Russia on last year for sure. More competitive. I mean, that towards the end of that game, obviously Spain kicked their way back into it, and you shout out that outside centre.
They're the 13 lefty for 13 taking all their kicks. Who was that?
Yeah, that was Andrea Rabago. Yeah.
Good boot on him.
He did, and he won them the game ultimately.
Yeah. And also Russia missed a sitter in the second half to take the lead. Or it was in the first half actually to take the lead from 7-7. They just missed a kick from the point.
I thought you were talking about the butchered try.
That I was going to get onto that as well because that was such a horrendous play. Oh my goodness!
He was through. He was there, and he had the ball in his left hand. I don't know what he was holding the ball, but it went very badly for him. Yes. They dropped the ball as they were
fell out of his hands. He just forgot to hold the ball.
They spent the whole last 10 minutes knocking at the door, 2 points down, and Spain, to their credit, got a couple of key steals and. Russia never sort of had the nous to settle down, even kick a drop goal.
Right. Yeah.
So it was ultimately a bit of a nervy one for Spain, but they got it done, and they got it done in the last play. I was about on the halfway line. They got a steal, and that's always a good way to win a game.
Yeah.
Someone's attacking you and you get that poach, and happy days.
The whole team can get bullish off that.
Yeah.
Fair play to Spain and Georgia kicking ahead, getting started with a win, but also shout out to Belgium for getting it done against the Germans. And Belgium were another team who looked thoroughly abject last year.
They did beat Germany. Germany were the most abject team, I think. It's a decent win. I didn't watch the game.
No, I didn't see most of it.
There's not much World Cup intrigue, unfortunately.
No, unfortunately not. Neither of these teams will feature. But as far as that tournament is concerned, it's good to have it underway. And
it's in these off weeks now, because there's an off week in the Six Nations. But that Georgia Spain game is going to be going on,
which is
definitely worth a gander.
One. I quite like watching the way Georgia play the game. To be honest, they're a different look to most teams, and certainly in the context of the World Cup, they'll be bringing something different because they just play it at a very different but very deliberate pace. That is just very unique. They seem to fly in the face of the common consensus of quick ruck ball. They don't seem to need it.
No, Ireland do something similar in that regard. They get quick ruck ball and then they slow it all down. Slow it all down. But what Georgia need is to be able to slow the pace when they don't have the ball.
Yeah.
Against teams who are moving it quickly, because that's when Fiji are coming at you. That's what you need. You need to be able to form rucks and get your jacklers in there and hold guys up. Yeah. Trap arms.
Something that Wales are very good at. In fact, in some of their iterations with some of their back row setups, they're good at just spoiling other teams' ball. Yeah, they still have a lot to go. And you're right in saying it's not ideal this tournament as a test for them or as a growing tool, because it just takes too long before any of what they've established as winning ways get tested in the proper environment to see if they actually are winning ways, or if you have to rip up the playbook again.
It's so key, and it's crushing because I think they're right there, and in terms of their support of the game, it's
they had good crowds in Tbilisi for these games.
They had fans in the Romania stadium, and they do get great crowds in Tbilisi, but they had fans travelling to Romania from Georgia, which is actually a very long trip.
Yes.
Not like it's all east from here, but it's it's a very long trip to fly from Georgia to Romania, and they just do it.
Yeah,
they can follow that team anywhere.
Yeah,
they'll be there in Japan, no doubt, for the Lelos, and It's just a shame that they're not getting routine game time at the top level, because it's definitely something that's preventing them from taking that next step.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
It is, yeah.
But
in the meantime, you can watch their games because they are interesting to watch, and and Spain are kind of, well, they're both 1 from 1 now, so this is kind of near tournament decider level already.
Yes, I would say so. I would say that last week in Romania was probably the most likely slip up for Georgia, and now it's very unlikely.
Much more plain sailing. Look to
From Romania's perspective, though, just before we move on, I'll just say that there should be, like, last week we were sort of writing their obituary. They had that terrible Timisoara team. They've had such hideous results in the last year. It's got to be deflating for them, and to go in and have a plan to derail Georgia and to execute it really well in the first half, like, that's got to be a source of some confidence
for sure.
And they should be
stuff to be
hungry
building on that
ahead of the games against Spain and Russia. They should be hungry,
and try and get some scalps, earn some scalps, for sure. But we'll pivot on, because the other news, Super Rugby, baby.
Super Rugby is back. It's back. Absolutely.
This weekend things get underway, and can't wait. It's gonna be an exciting one. I don't know how it's gonna go. Here it's all conjecture pre kickoff. Obviously, the easy thing to say is that the Crusaders are favourites, because the Crusaders are the Crusaders. But we're all starting off as usual, isn't it, with domestic?
The fixture list this week, unfortunately, I can't get them to load in Irish time, but I have the local times up. So there's Chiefs Highlanders is the starting. I think that's at 6:30 in the morning Irish time on Friday morning. I love Super Rugby because it actually regulates my sleep schedule. Gets me up in the morning.
It's better than any alarm clock.
Oh, indeed. It's great for that. Chiefs Highlanders again. That's a fun game to start with. I mean, certainly put it on your recording box, or if however you want to get it, if you stream it. It's one that's worth getting up for, because it's like the Kiwi derbies are always the cream of the crop when it comes to this tournament.
As far as standard, it's become more so like the Kiwi conference is really what you're looking at in terms of innovation a lot of the time.
And the Chiefs in particular, personnel wise, perhaps not as many esteemed names as they have had in years gone by. But they always have a bit of hustle and a bit of creativity about them.
They have that identity very much founded. It's like what it is to be a chief, and it's like they play a game a certain way. So it doesn't necessarily matter who the names on the jerseys are. They're going to play a style that's very, very relatable, because you see it all the time from
where the Highlanders have Ben Smith, and
they do have Ben Smith.
You say more than that?
I do not need, before I watch it. No, the prospect of seeing Ben Smith play rugby is normally enough for me.
Just as topping, you might get to see some Aaron Smith and Waisaki Naholo and Liam Squire
and some of those class All Blacks who are littered throughout the team.
It's good really watching. It's also Super Rugby in general, but especially in New Zealand, is just like there's always at least one wild card dude who's going to make it into the World Cup squad who we don't know yet.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just
so it's exciting to know who that might be.
Who's
the 21-year-old superstar winger who's coming to take Rico's jersey off?
Can you imagine?
Rico's gone, by the way. Imagine that.
Rico's off to Toulon.
Before the season's out.
Yeah, that's just
the kind of stuff that goes on. It's why they never have any wingers in the top end of international try scoring charts, because they just axe them before any of that can happen.
The other games going on Friday later in that morning, Brumbies are playing the Rebels. The Hurricanes are on the road to Australia. They have to play the Waratahs. Sunwolves are hosting the Sharks in Singapore. Bulls are playing the Stormers. Jaguares are playing the Lions. That's the full week. The game of the week, though, that I've left out is on Saturday morning, and I think it's another Kiwi derby. I think it's full of intrigue, and that is the Blues with their new coaching setup. Tanu Umaga's not gone, but he's now defensive coach. They've got a new head coach in. They've also got pulled off some results in pre-season against, I think, the Canes and a couple other teams, and they've had a good pre-season. They do have their starting 10 was Stephen Perifetta, who there was a bit of talk about, but he's gone down injured in the season. But they also have a bulky enough little midfield or three-quarter line, with Sonny Bill Williams and the return of Man Onu in the centre, not to mention Rico Ioane on the wing.
There's danger all over.
For the Crusaders D, that's a test straight up.
And like Crusaders who like to kind of flow into a season, trundle in very methodically, like they could be caught Could be caught cold away from home.
It's the first time that we've seen Sunnybill and Manonu play together since the World Cup final.
That might be true.
Yeah, where they were just tearing Australia asunder.
Yes, yeah. Now they're not up against Australia now. They're against Crusaders.
Yeah, so tougher challenge. Sure.
But
Kiwi fans will like that one.
Yeah, maybe the Aussies will be annoyed at that one. And to be fair, that was a great Aussie team that they were tearing apart. So this does bode well for the Blues' chances compared to years gone by. But then I'm not going to hold my breath on that.
No, because
too
every
often,
year.
And the Blues fans, if anyone's a Blues fan there, you have my sympathies, because it's so easy to get excited when you read a Blues team sheet and think it's going to be class. And then to watch it not be class in varying ways is very often
new coach though, bro.
Baffling. Yeah, new coach. Yeah,
new coach.
Yeah.
Come on,
there's hope.
It's time.
Yeah,
Auckland rising.
Maybe, but then what might happen, as has happened the last 2 seasons, is that the Crusaders might happen and get rid of all of those plans.
Surely not 3 years.
In a row.
The Rog Masterclass. Yeah,
Rog is impressing me with his punditry and his on it kind of interpretation of how rugby's going as well.
Honestly, Scott Robertson magic rubbing off. He's he's very thoughtful now about the game.
Introspective, very wise seeming.
Exactly. He's like the sage who's come back from the mountain and learned it all.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's an evidence and insight. Ronan O'Gara coming back and just doing punditry all over here is just an insight into the thinking that's going on, the elite level thinking that's going on
about the game. Certainly in places like the Crusaders, where it's like there are a few better places to be learning about the game and all of its facets.
You don't go far in Super Rugby betting against the Crusaders. You don't. So certainly the Blues are just one to watch for box office.
Definitely.
Also, Manonu is a man who's going to be determined. Like, he's back in New Zealand.
I'll be curious to see what kind of shape.
That's what he's there for.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'm curious to see what kind of shape he's going to come in. Hopefully, he'll have lost some of those extra kilos he picked up along the road in France.
That's really the pace of the game might shock him after a few years out of the game.
In France, that's a worry. Like, he's coming back from a place where it couldn't be further removed from Super Rugby paces. Like, it couldn't at all.
He's going to be trying to get his breath, and Sonny Bill's going to be throwing offloads at him, and he's going to be like, I have to run again.
Yeah.
So it's full of curiosity, and certainly that's the Kiwi derbies are certainly, for spectators, neutrals, those are probably the ones to watch.
Mm-hmm. Who are away in the Taz is the Hurricanes.
Hurricanes are away in Australia playing the Taz. Yeah,
that's a potentially exciting.
There's
game
a couple
as well.
of nuggets from Australia, obviously, and they could use the help, but at the moment, after last year's, and to me, as much as I love the bloke, it's a permanent black mark against Brad Thorne for how he chose to deal with
Quade Cooper and just turned the Reds into a still ineffective but now somehow less exciting and worse to look at version of that, which was that good value? Certainly in the context of the tournament, no.
In the context of the Reds, no. It didn't work for them.
Carmichael Hunt.
They didn't end up playing to their strengths.
To be fair, I like Brad Thorne a lot, and as Leinster fans, we owe him quite a bit in terms of his contribution to us. But yes,
he has his own mind about how to build a team, and he was just in a team that wasn't suited to being built that way, and is determined just to hammer it out that way.
Yeah.
So he's done his version of cleaning house, which is removing arguably the two most talented players from the squad, and we'll see how that goes for the Reds. But practically speaking, you have Carmichael Hunt now is playing for the Waratahs, and Quade Cooper is playing for the Rebels.
Yeah.
And both of those boys are going to be super motivated, and you're going to get a chance to see some loosey-goosey Aussie rugby.
Yes, and, which is an important flavour of Super Rugby.
It is indeed.
It creates some wonder tries.
It does indeed.
For both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple of other notes. That Tony Brown, whose guy I really rate, he was the Highlanders coach when they won. I think he was one of their coaches. He was their backs coach when he worked with Jamie Joseph.
Right.
And won Super Rugby. He was rumoured at one point to take over Leinster after I think when Matt O'Connor did get the job, he was rumoured to get the job.
Okay. What a different world that might have been.
Indeed. He's a very smart guy, loves his trick plays and his moves off set piece.
Right.
He's one of those, like a Justin Marshall, who sees a scrum and is thinking of all kinds of shapes.
Insta-calling it.
Yeah, all kinds of shapes, and likes to have a team with a bit of discipline as well. But he has become head coach of the Sunwolves ahead of this season.
That bodes well.
I expect to see some creative play from
at least some organised play.
Yeah,
that'd be nice.
Exactly.
The Sunwolves, it feels like they've been going for a few years now. It'd be nice to see them get a little bit of form, a little bit of growth that leads to them being a bit more combative in competitive fixtures.
Mad franchise. I mean, they spend more time on planes than they do on the rugby field.
Yeah,
and that's it can't be good.
It's true. But, it's got to be a factor. Sure, we've talked about that with Argentina as well, and the Jaguares are kind of in a similar boat with that concern.
They're a little kinder to the Jaguares in the way that it works out. I guess they can be with the Sunwolves as well, now that it's not 18 teams.
It's like blocks where they go to a place for a while, so they don't have to. So the
Jaguares are in the SAFA conference, the South African conference, so they spend a block of fixtures in South Africa, getting all their away fixtures out of the way. All the South African teams come to them and they play a block of fixtures at home, which is definitely a nicer way and a fairer way to do it. I think they must do something similar with the Sunwolves, but it feels like they're the team that's always just at the back. Like when they're making the fixture list, they just fill in the blanks with the Sunwolves. They make it work for everyone else, and then and the Sunwolves are going to New Zealand this week, and then South Africa, and then they have a home match, and then Australia.
Back to Cape Town, straight there from Australia. And we're gonna stop over in Dubai for a photo op, and then we'll be back there.
We're play one of our home games in Twickenham because
we need to grow the game. We need to spread it to that English market that we're just trying to crack into. I don't know. It was a stat from last year that it was like Creevy had flown around the world like 4 times or something in the space of one season between his duties with Argentina and with the Jaguares, and it was just like, that's mental. That's surely not good enough. And it was like, it plays into the fatigue factor that you see a lot of in terms of Argentina on a national level, but also some of the Jaguares performances and some of those Sunwolves performances where it's like you feel
the team are off a step.
The team are off a step from what you've watched the week before. Some of that at least has to be down to that jet lag and that travel.
I think the re-reducing. This is obviously the second year of it, of the competition down to 15 teams instead of 18. Definitely is an improvement.
Yeah.
So essentially, you have the Sunwolves as an extra Australian team, insofar as that makes any sense. Right. And the Jaguares as an extra South African team, which should help to block up the fixture somewhat. But obviously, it's still a work in progress because I think crosses the Indian and Pacific Oceans.
And the new system of that, I think once the inclusion of these Jaguares and Sunwolves teams, we haven't quite got it right as far as how the structure of the comp is concerned, because there are a few glaring issues, like that it's not exclusively down to them, but just the run of fixtures leading to the Lions making a final without ever having played a game in the regular season.
I don't think that can happen before. They never had to go to New Zealand,
and yet they're in the final of the tournament. It's like that feels very punitive on some teams who've played 3 or 4 times in a matter of weeks in New Zealand and got hockeyed each time. That's like, it feels not right.
The Lions they managed to accrue enough points to never have to travel in postseason, so they made a final. At home final without ever, so they could have won the whole tournament and never had to go and play New Zealand away. That just seems very but I think they fixed some of those problems, obviously not all,
as well as there being just slightly too many teams before, but also just like some non-competitive fixtures throughout and some kind of duds throughout the course of the regular season, and it's kind of all seemed to be leading up to wait for the minnows to be removed from the consideration before it gets interesting. And I couple that with a few like the misfiring Australian teams as well didn't help with that, where it was just, there was such a noticeable dip where you're looking at Aussie conferences and the points accrued and the win ratios versus New Zealand conferences and South African conferences, and it's like here now what's going on with the equity of this system.
It's a curious, like the South African ones, obviously Dwayne Vermeulen is back for the Stormers. They're in a good place, South Africa. For sure. Razzie's going to be managing things to a degree. The Lions have they've actually already named their team to play the Jaguares at the weekend. Wow. Pretty early.
Pretty brazen stuff.
I guess he's at 10. But they have, like, it's full of South African internationals. They have, obviously Skasan and Andres Katsia guys and Yankees. They're all going to be Lionel Mapu as well. All these guys.
It's good to see him back. Really good to see Lionel Mapu back.
In favour with your man Alistair Katsia, but not at all in the Razzie era. None of those guys. So they're going to be highly motivated to play themselves back in.
Or a shot for confidence. You never know. I don't know.
No, I think.
Will they come across a bullish new look Jaguares and get shocked?
The Jaguares are a team that, like, rather than in South Africa where you're talking about in terms of a World Cup context, you're just chugging along, doing what you do. They're going to be pretty happy. It's just getting the guys loose and back playing rugby for now. Like what you're looking at with the Jaguares is a group of players who need to get some confidence, need to get some form. And
this side of the World Cup.
A lot of that could be done perhaps, and is usually done in an Argentinian context pre-World Cup. They have a long sort of pre-season.
Well, it's like to go back on that point I made before in terms of the travel. Like Argentina are definitely a team that benefit from World Cup camps. Same as teams like Fiji and stuff, where you can get there, you can get settled, you can do your training, you can get your systems, and you don't have to fly anywhere. Yeah. And that's wonderful for them, and also just a welcome relief, so they can kind of play above their station as far as the rankings reflect. Purely because that gets skewed a lot by November tests and summer tests in terms of just, well, less so summer tests, they're not travelling, but certainly November tests where they have to bounce around the world.
Even Fiji do have to travel sometimes for summer tests. They have to go to like maybe Australia and play a game, and then they're in the back US. To Suva and then off to the US. Yeah, that
kind of stuff. Yeah, for sure. So it's like that's always skewed, and it means that they're more benefit for that. And the fact that we're starting at home for them. They've been in camp for however long now. Exactly. This is now. Like I don't know. I'm curious as to what kind of performance they put in. I'll be very disappointed if it's quite a tame loss as it has been before.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, will it still be the loosey goosey play that we seem to have got in the last few years? Anytime a Jaguares team has played against a South African team, it's always been very fast and loose, and the defensive systems are not really bossing it as much as the offense is.
You have to expect one of the things though in Super Rugby tends to take a few weeks to heat up, although the Kiwi derbies will definitely help in that department. Is that like it's very much August over there, like it's very much early season, getting your hands on the pill. Like we're from a Northern Hemisphere perspective are in the middle of the Six Nations. This is peak of the season, and it's just only going to get more and more climactic as the season goes on all the way to May.
And then beyond, because then it switches into World Cup mode.
Exactly, but from their perspective, it's very much we're starting out, getting the boys back on the pitch, seeing who's fit, seeing who's healthy, and throwing a bit of ball around. And it's gonna be fun viewing
for sure. Yeah. Anything else to say on it? Or
no, I think that's good. Up?
That's good. Super Rugby, it's back, and we're delighted. And to any Northern Hemisphere fans out there, try and watch a bit of Super Rugby because it's class. It's always. It's no good to get blinkered, particularly which can happen in the Six Nations in the context of thinking that like these are the only games happening and this is the only way to play rugby ever that exists ever in the world. And it's all the while there's a whole other brand that's going on in the other hemisphere, and it's very interesting because it's very often innovative, particularly with things like New Zealand Kiwi derbies. There's always some new innovation, some new insight, and something to be looking out for.
Absolutely, should be a fun one and catch a couple of games. Before we wrap up on the show, I just wanted to touch on a few things. Brazil obviously had their second ever win against Canada. The sort of I didn't get a chance to see the game. The emerging clip from the game, I think it was all kicks, 18-10 victory over Canada. The main thing that emerged was they have this super organised, very low to the ground scrum that was demolishing the Canadian scrum. But just to throw, for no particular reason, other than just my own skepticism, just throw a little bit of water on the fire of Brazilian rugby, is that Canada have been very much free falling off a cliff for a while. Like they had those games against Uruguay last year. They lost that game at home against Uruguay in the World Cup qualifier, and their coaches, their commentators rather on TSN just couldn't take it. It was a narrow loss at home to Uruguay, and they were all bullish about the return fixture in Uruguay where they got absolutely creased again. And they've been very much at sea for the last 4 years really. And it's just another chalk on the board of their free fall really, as far as I can see. But that said, Brazil are obviously
great to see,
a team on the rise, and certainly rugby in South America is beginning to become a tapped resource as far as rugby's being concerned. And that's no bad thing.
Definitely not. You want to globalise the game. It's good to see Brazil. Just and things like the organised scrum factor of it is good because that's such a technical coach thing that very often tier 2 teams get wrong or are found wanting in. So that's definitely a positive.
Yeah,
for sure.
Just the other thing worth mentioning is the domestic leagues in Europe are back this week after the sort of Six Nations break. I'm not sure the pick of there's actually, looking at this, there's quite a few mismatches, but Ospreys Ulster, the two teams in different conferences that need to win for different reasons, but both of them
could use a win at this point in the season.
Definitely need to win.
And shorn of a few players, it'll be interesting to see which ones respond better to that, because which squads respond. That's kind of the place we're at in the season domestically now, where it's like who has the squad to keep getting the results.
And there's like in both conferences there's scraps going on. Like the Treviso game against Scarlets.
That's an interesting one.
That's this Saturday as well. That's a huge game.
Are Treviso anywhere near the same potency without their internationals?
I don't know. The answer is probably no.
But similarly, Scarlets
haven't been good on the road this year, and if Treviso could get a win there, they would be very well positioned
to make the
finals
for the first time ever, which they're in the running for, in the hunt for.
Connacht v Cheetahs likewise is one you would expect Connacht to do.
It's a pretty game.
It's probably the last chance for Cheetahs to make it, because Cheetahs have made a good run with their easy fixtures. They've got back in the mix in the first conference, and but they've got a very tough run of fixtures coming up, and they're still not quite there. They probably need to win this game.
They're less affected, probably not so than Connacht, but they're less affected by
that's true.
The loss of international, because they're not in the Six Nations, so they should be targeting some of these fixtures despite the opposition sometimes, and despite being away from home in this instance. Like, you're going to look at a Connacht that's without Bundy Aki, it's without Quinn Rue, it's without their halfbacks.
Keelan Blade,
they might be released.
Keelan Blade might be released. I'd say I'd say Ross Byrne will play for Leinster.
Right. Just in the interest of getting minutes on the clock. But it'll definitely be a Connacht team short of a few leaders anyway. So they'll be looking to get after that. Yeah. In other news, Top Couture, I see you pulled up there.
Just seeing if there's any interesting games going on this weekend. Racing Toulouse would be the pick of those bunch there. Toulouse obviously with a few men shorn. Likewise Racing.
It's funny. How does that work with
Finn Russell?
There's Finn Russell.
I don't know. I know that they've been certainly with South Africans during the rugby championship.
They've dragged them out.
And Premiership teams are just ruthless.
Yeah,
you're contracted with us. We pay you. You have to come here now. And I would be shocked to see it override the Six Nations. If Finn Russell plays next week, I'd be shocked. But
Stranger things,
and
it is in France.
Could be one worth watching anyway. To sort of a top of the table clash, and the Premiership returns as well. The Saracens game is the one to watch, I would say, on most
weeks. That's always your argument. Just watch Sarries play rugby, and they're up against Leicester. In Sarries,
in Sarries,
where they will be probably winning
in London.
Bristol v Wasps. There's an interesting fixture.
I would, if you had to watch one, watch the Saracens game. But if you have to watch two, you can watch Bristol v Wasps.
I'm just looking over there thinking, musing. Don't watch the game.
Actually,
that's happening in Bath.
I'm sorry.
Gloucester
I wasn't even looking at the other fixtures. Gloucester Exeter.
This is also a pretty good game.
So there's for all of the Six Nations week off, there's a load of rugby to watch.
There's actually lots of rugby happening all over the world, and that's only a good thing.
Couple of just housekeeping things to mention. Sean O'Brien, Leinster legend, who we have to give all the praise and due props.
He played a great game the weekend.
He did.
It's good to see him back and being effective.
A few weeks ago, if London Irish had made that signing, I would have been calling it naive, like he hasn't played any rugby. Every time he has, he's gone down. But all of a sudden, he's delivered his most convincing Ireland international performance in a very long while.
Most convincing performances since the Lions tour. It's not the same. He's not the same, like, smash him up, absolutely destructive ball carrier that he was. But I'm encouraged
he's a very
to
effective
see
groundhog.
He's a very effective groundhog. He's very, very efficient in the maul. His latching in the maul, he actually adds a lot to Ireland's maul when he's there in that capacity, and Leinster's. But also, his ball carrying hasn't disappeared, but it's good to see him, like most of the Leinster loose forwards are doing now, just applying a little bit of footwork at the line to try and win the contact instead of just smashing over it as he was wont to do in his times gone by. But that's such a nutritional way to play that there's no way you can persist with that into your late mid-30s and onwards. It's like there's just no way that's going to be effective. So it's good to see him adding strings to his bow.
Certainly, he's going to put bums on seats for London Irish. From
London
Irish perspective,
it's a great way to legitimize the fan. Like, in terms of if London Irish are trying to sell it as literally have a tether to Ireland, so you need a few marquee Irish players in it.
Brendan McKinnon and Declan Kidney and Les Kiss, and obviously Paddy Jackson. We won't go there, but. That said, it's definitely a more Irish thread to it, and it's going to be interesting to see them going forward.
They're spending a lot anyway. They're targeting the move up and then the hitting the ground running.
Finally, I was going to just mention the Georgia superstar Fleet of Foot, who's now starting at 10. He was their under-20 superstar.
Right.
Tato Absandadza, I guess. Tato is what we call him.
Yes.
He's a beautiful player. He was their superstar, their under-20s team last year. and he's playing a 10 for them these days now.
Cool.
Had a quiet enough game on the weekend, but he's playing first team rugby for them.
That's good.
He's got signed by Breve, and Breve are obviously in the Pro D at the moment, but they're up there in that table. There's every chance they could be in the top tours.
Yeah.
So post World Cup, there's a chance that the Georgian 10 could be playing some top tours rugby,
which is only a good thing.
Huge,
yeah, for sure.
So yeah, that's just bits of news before we wrap up, which we will do now.
I do see the other little thing that there's Di Young finding Wasps gig a lonely place.
Yeah, no,
was that a quote?
That was a quote. Yeah,
I
read an interview with him. I was gonna touch on it, but I decided sort of not to because we probably haven't got the time to do it justice. But he was sort of just lamenting. I just feel bad for him. Like, he was always a very optimistic coach, and obviously I think his son has just been capped for Wales the weekend, Thomas Young. But he's just like, he's in such, like, the Wasps situation. I was going to basically use it as an excuse to talk about the Wasps situation, which is just
we've already
getting
done
bad
that.
and bad. But it's,
to be honest, in podcasts gone by, we have because we've had cause to talk about Wasps because we played them this year, and I think we've illustrated most of the points of which they're getting a lot wrong. And
Indeed.
I don't envy Di Young any more than I blame him. I don't blame him either, because I just like,
they're losing players every week now. That's the thing. Guys are just going elsewhere, and it's just,
well, they got nothing to sell them there at all.
Yeah.
So, and it seems the solution is just buy more.
I guess they do have Fekitoa, and they did release a great signing video for him.
Their social media game is well up there.
It is
well up there.
It is,
but their actual game is not.
No.
But yeah, no. I suppose won't bother going into that.
No, we've rambled enough for one podcast.
So we'll wrap up the podcast then.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's another juicy, hefty one that we'll have to chop up into mini vids to be consumable.
Yes.
But if anyone is listening this long, fair play to you. Thanks very much.
God, you've more stamina than me. I'm swaying in your seat.
We're kind of swaying at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks very much for listening. This has been number 41, and I suppose we'll be back next week with 42 and more to talk about.
Take care, guys.
From Six Nations.
Bye.
Bye.
Right.
You're up.
Yes, indeedy. The formalities.
Actually, this isn't. Now that we've changed the setup,
the camera can no longer fall.
There's no way of knocking the camera over. Yeah.
Well, unless you get really physical with it, which I'm going to try and do.
You just move the book.
Yeah.
Chair.
Hello. That was disappointing. All right, guys. See you next week.